You say you want the truth, but what you want is comfort. You want something that feels true. You want something that sounds right, something you can live with. You don't want to face what the truth actually demands from you. You want it to go easy, but the truth doesn't care about your comfort. It doesn't soften itself to fit your preferences. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. The moment something feels unpleasant, you call it harsh. The moment someone speaks plainly, you say they lack compassion. You flinch at hard facts and reach for softer stories. You hide behind ideas that sound noble but aren't true. You say things like, everyone has their own truth, because it lets you avoid choosing. It lets you keep every door open. But that's not truth. That's evasion. You like honesty when it confirms what you already believe, when it says you're right, when it blames someone else. You don't like it when it points back at you. You don't like being told that you're the reason things are broken, that you've made choices you don't want to admit, that you're not doing as much as you could, that you're afraid of things you pretend to be above. You hate that kind of truth, but it's still true. Let's say you're stuck in a job you hate. You come home exhausted, and you feel like your life is wasting away. You tell yourself you can't leave because you need the money, because it's not the right time, because you don't know what else you'd do. All those things sound reasonable, but none of them are why you're still there. You're still there because you're scared, because starting over means failing in public, because trying means the world might say no, and deep down, you'd rather stay miserable than be seen trying and failing. That's the truth, but you wrap it in softer words so you can live with it. Or take relationships. You're with someone who doesn't treat you well. They dismiss you, they lie, they make promises they don't keep. But you stay. You tell yourself they'll change. You say they're going through something. You say all couples fight. You want the comfort of being in love more than you want the truth about what kind of love this really is. And every time the truth speaks up, every time you feel that knot in your stomach, that flash of clarity, you silence it. You call it overthinking. You call it being dramatic. You bury it so you can keep pretending that things will get better. But they don't. They won't. Not because the world is cruel, but because you're refusing to look the truth in the eye. The truth doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It whispers. And if you ignore it long enough, you get used to the quiet. You start thinking silence is peace. But it's not peace. It's avoidance. You've numbed yourself to what's real. Even in your everyday life, you choose comfort over truth. You pick the easy version of everything. You want a diet that works without changing how you eat. You want fitness without effort. You want money without risk. You want meaning without pain. You want growth without discomfort. But none of that is possible. It's fantasy. And you're drawn to it because it promises you can have what you want without giving up what you like. That's not how it works. Change costs something. And truth always asks for payment up front. You scroll past real stories and click on ones that feel better. You follow people who agree with you. You curate your own reality. You feed yourself the same ideas until they sound like facts. You don't want to feel uncertain, so you make sure you never have to. You pick a side and stay there, even when the facts change, even when your gut tells you you're wrong. You mute the people who make you uncomfortable. You call them negative or toxic or closed-minded. Not because they are, but because they force you to think harder than you want to. You claim to value truth, but what you really want is comfort dressed up like truth. You want lies that feel good. You want to feel right, not be right. You say things like, I'm just being realistic when you're giving up. You say, I'm protecting my peace when you're avoiding responsibility. You dress fear up as wisdom. You call cowardice maturity. You call apathy acceptance. You use language to blur lines so you don't have to face what you're really doing. You don't need more encouragement. You don't need another motivational quote or a 5-step plan. You need to stop lying to yourself. That's where it starts. You need to admit what you already know, but are too afraid to say. That you're hiding. That you're waiting for something that won't come. That you've been telling yourself stories just to get through the day. This isn't about self-hate. It's not about blame. It's about seeing things clearly. That's what truth is. It's not cruel, but it is blunt. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't entertain. It just sits there, waiting for you to be brave enough to face it. And the thing is, deep down, you know this. You know when you're lying to yourself. You feel it in your body. You feel it in the hesitation before you speak, in the tightness in your chest when you try to sleep, in the relief you feel when someone finally says out loud what you've been too afraid to think. You know when you're living in comfort instead of truth. You know. But knowing isn't enough. You have to act. That's the part you keep skipping. You think if you just keep thinking, if you gather enough information, if you wait a little longer, maybe it will get easier. But it doesn't. In fact, it gets harder. The more you wait, the heavier the truth gets, the more buried it becomes, the more complicated the lies you have to tell to cover it. You think avoiding the truth is harmless, but it's not. It costs you time. It costs you relationships. It costs you your self-respect. Every day you live in denial is a day you could have lived in clarity. Every excuse you make is a brick in the wall between you and your actual life. This isn't something someone else can do for you. No one can force you to be honest with yourself. People can point things out. They can show you the gap between what you say and what you do. But you have to choose whether to look or not. And most of the time, you choose not to. You nod, agree, then go right back to the version of life you've built to keep yourself safe. But safety isn't the same as being alive. Safety isn't freedom, it's just familiar. And you'll stay in it until it hurts more than the truth does, until comfort becomes a prison, until pretending takes more energy than facing reality. The truth is not a threat, it's not your enemy, but it is sharp. It cuts through illusion, it clears the fog. And that can feel violent when you've been living in the dark. But after the sting comes clarity, comes peace. Not the fake kind, not the quiet that comes from denial. The kind that comes from knowing where you stand, from knowing who you are, and from knowing you're not afraid to face what's real, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. You say you want freedom. You talk about it like it's your highest value. You say you don't want to be tied down. You don't want to be told what to do. You want space, options, time to yourself. You want to be in control of your life. You say it often, and maybe you even believe it. But the truth is, your freedom is a cage. You've built your life around avoiding control, but in the process, you've trapped yourself in habits that own you. You don't want to be told when to wake up, so you stay in bed too long. You don't want anyone else setting your schedule, so you keep your days empty, but they fill up with noise. You don't want a boss breathing down your neck, so you avoid commitment, avoid deadlines, avoid structure. And yet, here you are, stuck, tired, frustrated, bored, free in theory, but going nowhere. You treat freedom like it means no rules, no expectations, no responsibility. But freedom without direction isn't freedom. It's drift. It's walking in circles and calling it movement. You think you're free because no one's telling you what to do. But something is. Your impulses, your routines, your need for comfort, your fear of failure. These things make all your choices for you, and you follow them without question. Let's say you work for yourself. You left a job that made you feel boxed in. You wanted to decide how your days looked. You wanted to build something on your own terms. So now, no one tells you when to start work. No one checks in. You get to make all the calls. And at first, that feels like freedom. But then the days start to blend. You waste time. You open your laptop, stare at a blank screen, then scroll your phone instead. You say you'll start later. Then it's evening, and you're annoyed with yourself for not doing anything. You stay up late, trying to make up for lost time, sleep in the next morning, and repeat the cycle. You've traded one kind of cage for another. Now it's not a boss you answer to, it's your worst habits. Or maybe you never took the risk at all. Maybe you never quit that job. You thought about it. You made plans, you dreamed, but you stayed. You told yourself it was the smart thing. You told yourself you'd leave when things were more stable, when you'd saved enough, when you'd figured out your next move. That was 5 years ago. You're still there. You still talk about freedom, but it's something you've pushed so far out. It's just a story now, something you might do one day. And in the meantime, you've built routines that keep you numb. Wake up, work, eat, scroll, sleep. You call it stability, but it's stagnation. You don't notice it at first because the routines are familiar. They feel safe, but they don't make you free. They make you predictable. You've done the same things in the same order for so long, you've forgotten you can change them. You think you need more motivation, more inspiration, but that's not what you're missing. You're missing the discomfort that comes from facing yourself. Freedom demands discipline, but that word turns people off. Discipline sounds rigid. It sounds cold. You want spontaneity, you want flow, but that only works when you've built a base strong enough to support it. You need structure to move freely. Otherwise, you're just flailing. You're not in a cage someone else built. You built it, and you built it with the same habits you say you hate. The same distractions you let in every day. You don't like being bored, so you fill every gap with noise, music, podcasts, social media, endless videos. You say it helps you relax. But what it really does is keep you from thinking, keeps you from feeling the weight of your choices. You don't like feeling stuck, but you do the same things every day. You take the same route to work, eat the same food, talk to the same people, think the same thoughts. You don't like being told what to do, but you obey your cravings like orders. You crave the idea of freedom, but you fear what it actually asks of you. It asks you to face your limits, to admit that you're wasting time, to admit that your life isn't being stolen from you, it's being handed away. One small choice at a time. One click, one scroll, one excuse. You fear the quiet that would come if you stopped running from yourself, because in that quiet, you'd hear everything you've been avoiding. Real freedom isn't about doing whatever you want, whenever you want. That's indulgence. And indulgence turns to addiction. You start to need comfort just to function. You can't sit still. You can't focus. You can't follow through. You think you're in control, but you've lost it. You're not free. You're just unsupervised. You avoid routines that feel imposed, but you never build ones that work. You say you hate being busy, but you keep yourself distracted. You say you want more out of life, but you're afraid to let go of the patterns that make you feel safe, even if they're killing your time and draining your energy. You talk about freedom like it's an escape, like you can run from what's wrong, but most of the time, the thing you need to escape is you. And that's the one thing you can't get away from. You avoid commitment because it feels like a trap, but commitment is the only way to get anywhere. Want to be strong? You commit to showing up. Want to learn something? You commit to practice. Want to build something real? You commit even when it gets boring. You think freedom means never being locked in, but nothing grows in that kind of soil. You stay shallow because you're afraid of being stuck. But staying shallow is its own kind of stuck. You're not lazy. That's not the point. You're just scared. Scared of what might happen if you change. Scared of what people might think. Scared of failing. So you make small choices that keep things familiar. And over time, those choices stack up. They shape your life. And suddenly, you look around and realize you're trapped, but by your own hand. You crave freedom because something in you knows you're built for more than this. But craving isn't enough. You have to move. And not just once, not just when you feel inspired. Every day, every moment. You break the cage by choosing something better, not something easier. There's no secret, there's no hack. You know what needs to happen. You've known for a while. You've just been hoping to find a version of freedom that doesn't cost effort. One that lets you keep all your habits and still go somewhere new. That version doesn't exist. You can have freedom, but not like this. Not while you stay loyal to your distractions, not while you keep blaming everything around you. You say you want to be free, then act like it. You're not who you think you are. You're just the version of yourself you've practiced the most. The one that gets by. The one that knows how to be liked. The one that learned early on what worked and never let it go. You've turned that version into a full-time role. You rehearse it every day, you wear it like skin, and you believe it's who you are because it's automatic now. But it's not you. It's just an act you've gotten good at. You didn't plan it that way. No one does. It starts small. You laugh when something isn't funny because everyone else is laughing. You say what you're supposed to say instead of what you really think. You downplay things that matter to you because you don't want to look weak. You build little habits like that, and over time, they become your identity. You keep repeating the same moves until you can't tell the difference between what's real and what's safe. Most of who you are isn't chosen, it's repeated. And repetition feels like truth. If you do something long enough, it starts to feel natural, even if it's not honest. You say you're confident, but it's not confidence, it's control. You've rehearsed sounding sure. You've learned how to avoid uncertainty. You speak with authority, not because you know, but because you don't want to be questioned. You've learned that being loud gets people off your back. Or maybe you go the other way. You play quiet, you play agreeable. You make yourself easy to like so no one ever looks too closely. You blend in so you won't get hurt. You do this because you had to. That's the part no one likes to admit. There was a time when it wasn't safe to be all the way real, so you adjusted. You figured out what got approval, what got attention, what kept things calm. Maybe it was at home, maybe it was at school, maybe it was just life showing you over and over that being honest costs too much. So you performed, and you got good at it. You got so good you forgot it was a performance. Look at how you speak in different rooms. Look at how you act around different people. It's not just code switching, it's self-editing. You put on different masks for different crowds, then call that adaptability. But the more masks you wear, the harder it gets to remember your actual face. Maybe you tell yourself you're easygoing. You don't need much. You don't care where you eat or what movie you watch. You just want everyone to be happy. That sounds nice, but it's not true. You care. You just don't want to be the one who speaks up. You've rehearsed silence so many times that it feels natural now. You've mistaken avoidance for personality. Or maybe you pride yourself on being the strong one. You don't ask for help. You don't show emotion. You keep things locked down. People admire that about you. They say you're reliable. They say you've got it all together. But that's not who you are. That's who you've trained yourself to be. And the training is wearing you out. You're not lying to others as much as you're lying to yourself. You've said the same lines so many times you believe them now. You say you're fine. You say it's just who you are. You say you're built like this. But if you stop to think about it, really think about it, you'd see it doesn't add up. The story you tell about yourself is full of edits. You've cut out the parts that didn't land. You've rewritten scenes to make yourself easier to live with. You don't do it on purpose. You don't sit down and say, I'm going to become a version of myself that hides what I feel. You just respond to life. You adjust to survive. But at some point, you stopped adjusting and started pretending. And the longer you pretend, the harder it gets to stop. Let's say you grew up in a house where emotion was a problem. Crying was weakness. Anger was dangerous. Joy was too loud. So you learned to keep everything even. You taught yourself how to read a room and stay one step ahead. You smiled when you needed to. You stayed quiet when things got tense. You became the version of yourself that could get through it. That version worked. It helped you cope. But now you're an adult and you're still playing the same part. The stage changed, but the script didn't. Or maybe you were praised for being smart. You learned to impress people with answers. You learned to be right, to solve things. You got used to being the person who figured it out. Now you don't ask questions. You don't admit when you're lost. You'd rather pretend to understand than risk looking weak. You've rehearsed being competent for so long that you don't know how to be vulnerable. You don't know how to say, I don't know. You think being yourself means never slipping up, never showing doubt. But that's not you. That's your act. You're not fake. That's not what this means. You're just layered. And some of those layers were built to protect you, but they've outlived their purpose. What kept you safe then is keeping you stuck now. You can't grow if you're still clinging to the version of yourself that only knows how to survive. You think the problem is that people don't see the real you. But they don't see you because you won't let them. You only show what you've practiced, what feels polished. You give them the role, not the person. And it's not their job to look deeper. It's yours to show up. You don't need to tear everything down. You don't need to become someone new. But you do need to stop performing long enough to ask, who would I be if I wasn't trying so hard? If I didn't rehearse my lines before I spoke? If I didn't second guess every move? What would I say if I wasn't afraid of how it sounded? You can't find your real self by thinking about it. You find it by noticing where you perform. You find it in the moments when you feel the urge to edit, to shrink, to impress, to prove. That tension you feel, that's the signal. That's the moment where the act takes over. And if you can pause there, just for a second, you can choose something different. You've been rehearsing your part for years. You know it by heart. But you're allowed to step off stage. You're allowed to forget your lines. You're allowed to fumble. That's the only way to remember who you were before the act began. Most of what you believe didn't start with you. You weren't born with it. You picked it up without thinking. You took it in because someone said it with confidence, or because it was said often enough that it started to sound like truth. It came from your parents, your school, your church, your neighborhood, your friends. You didn't choose your beliefs. You absorbed them. And now you carry them like they're yours, but you never stop to ask if any of it makes sense. You think you believe what you believe because it's right. You think you looked at the world, considered the facts, and made your own mind up. But most of the time, that's not what happened. What happened is you were told something over and over, and eventually you stopped questioning it. You made it part of how you see yourself. And now if someone challenges it, it feels personal, like they're attacking you. But they're not. They're poking holes in a story you didn't write. Start with something simple. What do you believe about money, about success, about failure? You probably think you earned your beliefs. You probably think they came from experience. But listen to how you talk about those things. You say things like, "That's just how it is," or "That's the way the world works." Who told you that? Did you figure it out on your own? Or did someone say it to you when you were too young to disagree? Let's say you believe money is hard to get. You believe rich people are selfish. You believe if you want to be a good person, you shouldn't care too much about money. Those ideas didn't come out of nowhere. Maybe you heard your parents talk about how people like us don't get ahead. Maybe you watched them struggle and decided that struggle was normal. Maybe your teachers praised hard work but never talked about smart work. So now you work hard and wonder why things still feel tight. You feel guilty for wanting more. Even if more would help, you push money away without realizing it, because deep down you think wanting it makes you greedy. But none of that started with you. You inherited it. Same thing with success. Maybe you believe success means climbing a ladder, getting promoted, earning respect, being busy. That belief probably came from watching adults who looked tired all the time. They worked long hours. They kept going, no matter what. And when they burned out, people clapped. They called it dedication. So now you repeat that pattern. You chase a version of success that leaves you empty. You do it because it feels familiar, because the world praises it. You think it's your choice, but you never asked if it was worth it. Look at your beliefs about relationships, about love, about trust. Maybe you believe love should be hard, that it should hurt sometimes, that it's normal to feel anxious, to feel like you have to earn someone's care. That belief likely came from watching the people around you confuse love with control, or silence, or absence. You think jealousy means passion. You think drama means depth. You learned that from somewhere. Maybe not in words, but in patterns. You watched it play out enough times that it felt like a rule, and now you follow it, even when it leads to the same pain. What you believe about yourself, your value, your identity, your future, it all came from somewhere. Someone told you what to expect from life, and you believed them. Maybe they told you you're gifted. So now you can't fail without it feeling like collapse. Or maybe they told you you're not that special, and now every success feels like luck. You don't even let yourself enjoy it. You wait to be exposed. Either way, the script was handed to you, and you stuck to it. The most dangerous beliefs are the quiet ones, the ones you don't even think of as beliefs, the ones that sound like facts. You don't say them out loud because they live under the surface. Things like, "I'm not lovable," or "I always mess things up," or "good things don't last." You don't know where they came from. You just know they've been with you for a long time. They guide your choices, they color your moods, and you've mistaken them for reality. You say you trust your instincts, but instincts are shaped by your environment. You were trained to see certain things as normal. You were trained to look away from others. What feels right to you might only feel right because it's what you know. What feels wrong might just be unfamiliar. That's the problem with inherited beliefs. They feel like home, even when they hurt. You build your life around these beliefs. You make decisions based on them. You choose careers, partners, friendships, and goals based on ideas you never examined. And then you wonder why things don't feel right, why there's tension in your gut, why you keep ending up in the same situations. It's because you're acting out a script that isn't yours. If you don't pause and question your beliefs, you'll end up living someone else's life. You'll chase things you don't care about. You'll avoid things that could change everything. You'll follow rules that don't make sense, and you'll call it being realistic. Most people never question what they believe, not because they don't want to, but because they never learned how. They were taught that belief equals identity, that changing your mind means you're weak, that asking questions is disrespectful. So they hold on tight. They repeat what they were told. They defend it, even when it's clearly not working. But belief should be earned. It should come from paying attention, from testing things, from seeing what holds up in real life. You can't just accept something because it's what you were taught. You have to look it in the eye. You have to ask, is this actually true? Not does it feel true or do I want it to be true? But does it stand up when I stop pretending? You might be afraid that if you let go of your old beliefs, you won't know who you are. That's fair. But if you're holding on to something false, who you think you are isn't you anyway. It's just another costume, another hand-me-down. Beliefs shape behavior. They shape emotion. They shape how you see the world. But they can be changed. They should be changed. If your beliefs are leading you in circles, if they keep you small, if they make you afraid, why are you still carrying them? You don't have to believe everything you inherited. You don't have to protect the ideas that were handed to you by people who didn't know better. You don't have to live by rules that were built out of fear or pain or someone else's need for control. You can let them go, not all at once, not in some big dramatic gesture, but piece by piece, belief by belief. You just have to start by asking, where did this come from? Who gave it to me? And what would my life look like without it? You don't care as much about being good as you care about being seen as good. You want to be approved of. You want people to say you're kind, thoughtful, moral. You want credit. You want reputation. You want to feel clean. And so you perform. You learn the lines. You memorize the right opinions. You signal the right values. You build an image, one that says, I'm a good person. And you protect that image, even when it has nothing to do with how you actually live. You say the right things in public, even if you ignore them in private. You repost the right causes, but don't act on them. You use the language of compassion, but only when it costs nothing. You claim to hate injustice, but only when it's far away or fashionable. When it lands close to you, your job, your family, your comfort, you stay quiet. You find reasons not to speak, not to act. You tell yourself you're just being careful. But the truth is, you don't want to risk being seen differently. You don't want to lose your place in the room. Morality has become a performance, something you do when people are watching. You say, be kind, but your kindness ends when someone disagrees with you. You say, do no harm, but you look the other way when harm benefits you. You say, we should all listen more, but only if the speaker agrees with your beliefs. You say, we're all human, then treat people like villains, because it's easier than understanding them. You've learned that image is everything, so you work hard to look like someone who gets it. You know the terms, you know how to navigate outrage, you know how to nod at the right moments. But it's all strategy. You're not trying to be good, you're trying to avoid looking bad. You care more about your moral brand than your actual behavior. That's why you get more upset when someone questions your character than when someone points out a real mistake. You're not angry because you were wrong. You're angry because someone threatened the version of yourself you've worked hard to present. You say, that's not who I am, instead of asking, did I do harm? You jump to defend yourself, not to learn, but to protect your status. Being good is hard. It requires self-examination. It requires giving things up. It means doing things that no one claps for. It means doing the right thing even when you get no credit, especially when you get no credit. But that's not what you're after. You want the applause without the discomfort. You want to be seen as right without changing much. So you curate your identity. You align yourself with whatever makes you look thoughtful, generous, progressive, humble. And you keep your real motives tucked away. Maybe you volunteer. Maybe you donate. Maybe you make all the right public statements. But what about the way you talk behind closed doors? What about how you treat people when they're inconvenient? What about when you know someone's being hurt and you choose silence? That's where your morality lives, not in the performance, but in the parts no one sees. Look at how you react when someone else makes a mistake. Do you rush to understand or do you rush to judge? Do you give them room to explain or do you drag them down to make yourself feel superior? Be honest. Sometimes the harshest judgments come from people who need to believe they would never do the same. But no one is immune. If your morality depends on staying clean while pointing out how dirty everyone else is, it's not morality, it's ego. You want to be a good person. That's fine. But most of the time, good person just means person who looks good. It means someone who has the right image, the right words, the right allies. It doesn't mean someone who does what's right when it's hard, when it's messy, when it's unpopular. Think about how you use apology. Do you use it to repair or just to preserve your image? Do you say, I'm sorry so you can move on, or because you really want to make it right? A real apology doesn't center you. It doesn't protect your reputation. It says, I did harm, and I care more about fixing it than defending myself. But most apologies you hear, and maybe the ones you give, are written like PR statements. They aren't about the person who was hurt. They're about keeping your role in the story. You've built your identity around being one of the good ones. You tell yourself you're on the right side. You surround yourself with people who reinforce that belief. And if anyone challenges it, you don't reflect. You push them out. Because being seen as moral has become more important than being moral. You'd rather lose the truth than lose your role. If being seen as good becomes your focus, you start avoiding anything that risks conflict. You don't speak up when someone needs you. You don't stand up when things are wrong. You wait for permission. You wait to see which way the wind is blowing. Then you speak, once it's safe. Once it's clear which opinion will get praise. You've mistaken performance for virtue, and you've convinced yourself it's enough. But performance is always safe. And morality, real morality, is not. It risks misunderstanding. It risks unpopularity. It risks loss. You have to give up things to stand for something. You have to put your comfort down. Being good isn't about having the right opinion. It's about living it. Every day, when no one is watching, when no one gives you points, when it doesn't feel good. It's small things. It's choosing not to gossip. It's admitting when you've been unfair. It's apologizing without excuses. It's listening to someone you dislike because they might be right. It's stepping in when silence would be easier. But that won't get you praise. No one will clap for that. And maybe that's the real test. If there were no rewards, no likes, no retweets, no admiration, would you still do the right thing? Would you still speak up? Would you still examine yourself? Or would you wait for the audience to return so you can pick the mask back up? Because that's what a lot of people do. They don't want to be good. They want to be convincing. And they've gotten very good at it. So good, they've fooled themselves. You don't like silence. You don't even notice that anymore because you've built a life that keeps it out. You wake up and reach for your phone. You check something, doesn't matter what. Messages, news, weather, social media. You just need noise. You play music while you shower, a podcast while you cook, a video while you eat. You scroll while you wait. You scroll while you walk. You scroll while you lie in bed, long after you said you'd sleep. You keep the volume up and the thinking down. You say it's about staying informed, or staying connected, or unwinding. But that's not it. You use distraction like a shield. You use it to block out silence, because in the silence you hear things you don't want to hear. You think about things you don't want to face. You feel things you don't want to feel. It's easier to fill the space than sit in it. Silence makes you uncomfortable because it's honest. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't let you lie to yourself. When there's no input, there's only you. And most of the time, you don't like being alone with you. In silence, you notice what you've been avoiding. That pit in your stomach, that thought that keeps looping, that regret you haven't dealt with, that fear that keeps following you around. The voice that says you're falling behind, the one that says you're not doing enough, that you're not enough. You don't want to hear that voice. So you drown it out. You think you're relaxing, but you're running. You think you're taking a break, but you're hiding. Every time you scroll, you're choosing comfort over clarity. You're trading presence for distraction. Try this. Sit still. No phone, no music, no screen, no conversation. Just you. 10 minutes. See how fast your mind starts looking for an escape. See how quickly the boredom shows up, or the restlessness, or the guilt. Your brain doesn't know what to do with stillness anymore. It's used to input. It's addicted to it. You've trained it that way. You want peace, but you don't practice silence. You want clarity, but you never stop long enough to hear what's going on inside you. You say you're overwhelmed, but you won't stop feeding the overwhelm. You want answers, but you don't create space for them to show up. You keep refreshing your feed and wonder why you feel disconnected. Distraction is cheap and endless. It fills time, but it empties you. It keeps you occupied, but not satisfied. You get to the end of a day and you don't know where your time went. You don't remember what you consumed. You don't feel rested. You don't feel clear. You just feel tired, but not in your body, in your mind. Silence isn't just about sound. It's about space. It's about putting down the input long enough to let something surface. When was the last time you let yourself be bored on purpose? When was the last time you sat in a room and didn't reach for something the moment it got quiet? You say you don't have time, but that's not true. You just fill the time before it can show you something real. You scroll when you wait in line. You scroll when you eat alone. You scroll when there's 5 minutes between tasks. And if you stop scrolling, you feel like something's missing. Something is. You're missing from your own life. You're always somewhere else, on a feed, in a fantasy, inside someone else's words. But rarely here. Rarely now. And it's costing you. You don't know what you think. You don't know what you feel. You don't know what you want because you don't give yourself time to listen. You consume to avoid reflection because reflection brings up questions you don't want to answer. Are you living how you want to live? Are you proud of how you spend your time? Are you being honest with yourself? Are you running from something? You can't outrun those questions forever. They find you in the quiet, and that's why you keep it noisy. That's why the silence scares you, because it sees through your performance. It doesn't care about your feed. It doesn't care how polished your life looks. It only cares about truth, and truth makes you uncomfortable. So you keep reaching for something to block it out. You weren't always like this. There was a time when you could be still, when you could sit in your room and stare out the window and be okay, when your thoughts weren't enemies, when silence didn't feel like pressure. But now it does. Now silence feels like exposure. It feels like being seen. You're not the only one. Everyone's addicted to distraction. Everyone's scared of stillness. It's easier to numb than to feel. Easier to scroll than to sit with the truth. But that truth doesn't go away. It waits. And the longer you avoid it, the louder it gets. Eventually, the noise stops working. The content doesn't help. The scrolling doesn't soothe. The distractions start to feel like what they are, empty. Silence has something to show you. Not just what hurts, but what's real. What matters, what's been buried under the noise. It's not just fear in there. There's clarity too. There's direction. There's peace. But you don't get any of that unless you stop running. You think silence is your enemy. It's not. It's the place where you meet yourself, where you get honest, where you notice what you've been avoiding. And maybe that's scary, but maybe it's also what you need. You think you're in control. You think you're steering the wheel. You believe you make choices because you choose them, but most of the time, you don't. You're not thinking, you're reacting, you're following patterns, habits, scripts you didn't write. Your life runs on autopilot and you call it direction. You wake up and check your phone without meaning to. You scroll without thinking. You eat what you always eat. You say what you always say. You go through the motions, same routines, same responses, same thoughts. You think it's you making those choices, but it's not. It's the system you built to avoid thinking. Your brain loves shortcuts. It saves energy by turning your life into a loop. It notices what you do often and automates it. That's why you end up having the same kind of day over and over, even when you swear things will change. It's why you say, you'll be more present, more intentional, more focused. But by noon, you're already back in the loop. You drift, you react, and it feels normal. You don't realize how much of your life is just muscle memory, how much of what you do is driven by habit, emotion, and impulse. You don't stop to ask why you do what you do, because stopping is uncomfortable. It pulls you out of the script. And when that happens, you feel uncertain, you hesitate, you don't know what to say, so you go back to autopilot because at least it's familiar. Take something simple, how you handle stress. You probably think you've got a system, but most of the time, you don't even see the stress coming. You feel tight and you reach for comfort. Maybe it's food, maybe it's scrolling, maybe it's checking out, zoning out, shutting down. It happens fast. You don't choose it, it just kicks in. And afterward, you call it coping. But coping isn't the same as control. It's just habit dressed up as decision. Or look at how you talk to people. You think you're having conversations. You're not. You're repeating patterns. You listen long enough to respond, not to understand. You say what you always say. You react to tone, not meaning. If someone challenges you, you defend. If someone praises you, you deflect. It's a script. You didn't write it consciously, but you run it daily. Even your self-image is on autopilot. You believe things about yourself that you've never tested. You say you're not creative, or not disciplined, or not confident. You believe it because it feels true. But what feels true isn't always real. It's just familiar. You've repeated those thoughts so often they don't even sound like thoughts anymore. They sound like facts. And so you don't question them. You accept them, and you act from them. You think control means having options. But control isn't about having options. It's about seeing them. When you're on autopilot, you don't see your options. You do what you've always done, and you call it who you are. You call it personality. You call it instinct. But it's just repetition, a loop. Your phone lights up, and you pick it up. Your body feels tired, so you procrastinate. You feel rejected, so you withdraw. You don't pause. You don't think. You follow the path with the least resistance because it's the one you've walked the most. And the more you walk it, the more automatic it becomes. You say things like, "That's just how I am." But is it? Or is it just how you've been? You assume your behavior is you, that your reactions are your personality, that your preferences are hardwired. But most of what you believe about yourself is just pattern, not identity. Take a look at your day. Break it down, not the big events, the small stuff. The moments between moments. When you finish a task, what do you do next? When you're bored, what do you reach for? When you feel uncomfortable, how do you react? You'll start to notice how little choice you actually use. You're not living with intent. You're running loops. You think you're deciding, but really, you're defaulting. And it's not just behavior, it's emotion. You feel a certain way, and it dictates your day. If you wake up tired, the whole day is sluggish. If you feel anxious, you cancel plans. If you feel insecure, you shut down. You think your emotions are in charge. But emotions are just signals. They don't have to steer. You let them steer because you've never practiced not letting them. Control doesn't mean you never feel chaos. It means you don't obey it. It means you see the reaction coming and choose not to follow it. But you can't do that if you don't notice it. And most of the time, you don't notice it. You're too deep in the pattern. You want to change, but you keep using the same methods that keep you stuck. You buy planners, you make lists, you download apps, but nothing changes. Not because you're broken, because you're not in control of the deeper part, the unconscious loop that runs your life while you focus on the surface. You believe awareness is enough. It's not. You can know you're on autopilot and still stay there. Getting off autopilot requires friction. It requires effort. It means waking up in the middle of the loop and doing something different. Not better, just different. That's how you start to get control back. Control means ownership. Not over the world, not over outcomes, but over yourself, over your reactions, over your choices, over your time. But ownership starts with seeing what you're actually doing, not what you wish you were doing, not what you pretend to be doing, what you're really doing. That's the hard part. Looking at your life without flinching, seeing how many of your actions are just responses to emotion, seeing how many of your habits aren't helpful, just familiar, seeing how many of your decisions are just routines you never questioned. It's It's not about guilt. It's not about shame. It's about seeing clearly. You can't change a pattern if you won't admit it exists. You can't take control of a life you're not actually present for. Autopilot feels safe. It feels easy. But it steals time. It drains potential. You don't even notice it happening. You look up and another week is gone, another month, another year. You say you don't know where the time went, but you do. It went into the loop. You won't break the loop all at once, but you can interrupt it, one moment at a time. One breath, one choice. That's how control starts. Not with big plans, but with small awareness, with asking, is this what I want to do, before you do it? Most of your life is on autopilot, and you call that control. But control only exists when you're awake for your own life. And waking up hurts at first. It feels unnatural, but it's the only way to stop sleepwalking through a life that isn't really yours. You say you want deep connection. You say you want to be seen, understood, known. You talk about closeness like it's the goal, like it's what makes life meaningful. But when someone gets too close, you pull away. You change the subject. You make a joke. You shift the attention back to them. You do anything but let them see you. Not really. Because the truth is you fear being known. You want connection, but only on your terms. You want to share, but only what feels safe. You want to be open, but only if you can stay in control. You think vulnerability is a doorway, but you treat it like a window with thick curtains, letting in just enough light to look inviting, but never enough to expose the mess inside. You have parts of yourself you don't show, not because they're horrible, but because you think they might be. You think they'll be too much, or not enough. You think if someone saw you fully, they'd change their mind. So you edit. You present the version of yourself you think is acceptable. You manage your image, even in close relationships. You perform intimacy without ever really stepping into it. You tell stories, but you keep them clean. You admit struggles, but only ones you've already resolved. You talk about pain, but in past tense. You don't speak from the wound. You wait until it's a scar. You show emotion, but only when it's tidy, only when you can explain it. You say you want honesty, but you practice omission. You say you want someone to know the real you, but you're not sure who that is anymore. You've been hiding for so long, it's hard to tell the difference between who you are and who you pretend to be. You're not lying, you're just protecting yourself. But protection has a cost. You can't be loved for who you are if no one ever gets to see who you are. And that's the gap you keep running into. You crave connection, but it feels like something's always missing. That something is honesty, full honesty, not filtered, not rehearsed, just raw and present and real. You fear being known because you assume being known means being judged. You assume people will take one look at your flaws and walk away. Maybe that happened before. Maybe someone you trusted used your openness against you. Maybe you were punished for being real. So now you flinch when things get too deep. You disappear when conversations go beyond the surface. Not all at once, just in small ways. You stop texting back. You cancel plans. You get busy. You tell yourself you're just tired. You tell yourself you need space. But what you're really doing is retreating. You're creating distance before anyone can see too much. Before anyone can say the thing you've already said to yourself in your worst moments. If they knew the truth, they wouldn't stay. And yet deep down, you want someone to stay. You want someone to look past the version you show and say, I see all of it, and I'm still here. You just don't believe that's possible. So you test people. You reveal small things to see how they react. You tell half the story and watch their face. You look for signs that they're pulling away. And when they don't, you pull first. Because at least that way, you're in control. You've mistaken being known for being exposed. You've confused connection with risk. But connection isn't risk. It's the reward that comes after risk. It's what you get when you stop protecting yourself long enough to be seen. Think about the people who feel closest to you. Chances are they've seen you in a moment you didn't plan, a breakdown, a confession, a failure. You didn't perform in those moments. You didn't curate, you just showed up. And in doing that, you built trust. Because connection doesn't happen in perfection. It happens in mess, in truth, in the moments where you stop pretending. But you fight that. You'd rather be admired than understood. Because admiration keeps people at a distance. Understanding brings them close. And closeness feels dangerous. You don't want someone to think you're weak, so you hide your uncertainty. You don't want someone to think you're selfish, so you swallow your needs. You don't want someone to think you're broken, so you act like you've already healed. And all of that effort keeps you alone. You build relationships on half-truths, then wonder why they feel incomplete. You show people the parts of you that are easy to like, and then get frustrated when they don't understand you. But how can they understand you when you keep the real parts tucked away? It's not about telling everyone everything. It's about being honest with yourself about where you're holding back, about why, about who you're protecting, and whether they still need protection. Sometimes you tell yourself you're just private, that you don't like talking about yourself. But privacy isn't the same as fear. Privacy is a choice. Fear is a reaction. And most of the time, you're reacting. You want connection to feel safe. But real connection doesn't start with safety. It starts with courage, with saying the thing that scares you, with showing up unpolished, with letting someone see the parts of you that haven't been edited for comfort. You keep thinking you need to fix yourself before you let someone in. But that's not how it works. You don't connect once you're ready. You connect by being real while you're still figuring it out. That's what makes it honest. That's what makes it human. You fear being known because you assume you'll be rejected. But what if you won't be? What if being known is the very thing that makes someone stay? What if the parts you hide are the parts someone could love? You won't know until you stop hiding, until you stop performing closeness and start living it. Not all at once, just piece by piece, word by word, moment by moment, letting someone in even when it feels risky, especially when it feels risky. Because you don't build deep connection by being perfect. You build it by being true. You lie constantly, not once in a while, not in high-stakes situations, every day. You lie to others, yes, but more than that, you lie to yourself. And you don't even notice anymore, because the lies don't sound like lies. They sound like explanations. They sound like excuses. They sound like facts. You say you're fine when you're not. You say you're tired when you're unmotivated. You say you're busy when you're avoiding something. You say, maybe later, when you mean probably never. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow. You say the timing's not right. You act like you're being strategic when you're just scared. You tell yourself you're over it, but it still eats at you. You say you don't care, but you do. You care a lot. You lie to keep the peace, but mostly to keep the illusion. The illusion that you're okay, that things are under control, that you're the kind of person you want to believe you are. But that illusion comes at a cost. Every time you lie, even in small ways, you move further away from what's real. You don't live in truth. You live in a version of truth that protects your comfort. You lie to avoid confrontation, not just with people, but with yourself. You lie so you don't have to admit you're stuck, that you're not where you said you'd be, that you're not doing what you said you would, that your goals became slogans, that your potential has turned into a theory you repeat instead of something you live. You lie when you pretend you're putting in effort. You say you've tried everything, but you haven't. You say you've been working hard, but you've mostly been thinking about working hard. You say you're serious, but your actions don't back it up. You do the minimum and call it progress. You skim books and call it learning. You talk about discipline, but won't give up distractions. You lie about your priorities every time you choose comfort over commitment. You lie when you blame other people. You say it's their fault you feel this way, that if they hadn't done what they did, you'd be fine. But that's not true. They may have hurt you, but you're the one keeping the wound open. You replay it. You feed the story. You get something out of holding on to it. Pity, protection, justification. So you lie and say you're the victim, when really you've just refused to take your hands off the past. You lie in your relationships. You say it's okay when it's not. You say it's not a big deal when it is. You say you don't need anything when you do. You lie by staying silent, by saying yes when you want to say no, by pretending to agree, by pretending not to care. And every time you do it, you trade honesty for approval. You choose being liked over being real. You lie when you present a version of yourself that isn't true. You exaggerate your confidence. You downplay your insecurity. You act like you have it figured out when you're confused. You wear personalities like outfits and change them depending on who's in the room. You've done it for so long, it doesn't even feel like lying anymore. But it is, and it leaves you feeling unknown, disconnected. Not because people don't want to know you, but because you never gave them the chance. You lie when you say you don't know what to do. You say you're waiting for clarity, but really, you're waiting for it to get easy. You're hoping the fear will go away on its own, that one day you'll wake up brave. But that day doesn't come. You lie to buy time, even though time alone won't fix anything. Action does, but action requires truth, and you haven't made room for it. You lie when you say you're not ready. You don't think you're lying. You think you're being honest about your limits. But look closer. How long have you been not ready? How many chances have you turned down? How many doors have you stood in front of, convincing yourself it's not the right moment? You're not protecting yourself. You're protecting the story that you're still preparing, and you've been preparing forever. You lie when you downplay what you want. You say you don't need much. You say you're content. But that's not contentment. It's resignation. You act like wanting more makes you ungrateful, like ambition is arrogance. So you lie and settle. You make your life smaller and call it peace. You lie when you say you've moved on. You say you've let go, but you still check their page. You still play conversations in your head. You still feel that pull when you hear their name. You're not over it. You're just tired of talking about it. So you lie and say it's done, because admitting the truth would make you feel weak, or exposed, or stuck. You lie when you say you're being honest. Even your honesty is filtered. You tell the version that makes you look good. You confess things only once you've spun them. You pretend you're being open, but you're still in control, still performing, still holding back. You lie because the truth makes you feel naked, vulnerable, accountable. It forces you to change or admit that you won't. And most of the time, you'd rather protect the image than do the work. These lies are quiet. They're not dramatic. You don't wake up and say, I'm gonna lie today. But you do, in small, automatic ways. You lie with your words, with your silence, with your choices. You lie by avoiding, by procrastinating, by distracting. You lie to stay comfortable, to stay safe. But it doesn't feel safe. Not really. It feels heavy. It feels hollow. It eats at you slowly. You can't build anything real on lies. Not a relationship, not a goal, not a life. And you know that. But truth takes courage. It takes presence. It takes facing the gap between what you say and what you do. And most people aren't ready for that, but you're not most people. You're reading this because you know something's off. You can feel it. You're tired of lying to yourself, not because you're bad, not because you're broken, but because you're done pretending. And the first step back to yourself is this. Call the lie what it is. Out loud, without excuse, without spin. Until you do that, nothing changes. You'll keep saying you want the truth, but you'll keep hiding from it too. And it'll keep costing you more than you realize. You chase success like it's oxygen. You think it will fix things, make things feel right, prove something. You push for more status, more recognition, more proof that you've made it. You think it's for you. But if you're honest, it's not. Most of the time, it's for people you don't even like, people you envy, people you resent, people who once made you feel small. And now you're building your life as a performance to get their attention. You want to win, but not just to win. You want to be seen winning. You want your success to be undeniable. You want the people who overlooked you, doubted you, ignored you, to watch. You want them to regret it. You want them to feel what you felt. You want them to see what you've become and feel like they missed out. That's the real goal, even if you won't admit it. This isn't about growth. It's about revenge dressed up like ambition. You build a version of success that looks good from the outside. You chase titles, you chase numbers, you chase visibility. You want the job that sounds impressive, the lifestyle that looks polished, the relationship that photographs well. You pick the thing that plays well in conversation, not the thing that brings you peace. You're not asking what matters, you're asking what sells. You shape your life around applause. You want approval more than purpose. You want to be envied more than you want to be free. You tell yourself you're just driven, but what drives you isn't love for the work, it's resentment, it's spite, It's the voice in your head that still sounds like someone else, the one that said you'd never get far, the one that rolled their eyes, the one that talked over you. And now everything you chase is about proving that voice wrong. You say you want success on your own terms, but you don't. You want success on terms other people will recognize. You want success that counts in the room you used to be ignored in. You want success that makes you untouchable. So you pick goals that fit that mold, even if they drain you, even if they lead you to a life that feels nothing like you. Maybe you got into a certain field because it was respectable. Maybe you took a job because it sounded good, not because it felt right. Maybe you stayed in a situation because leaving would look like failure. And every time you make those choices, you get further from what you actually want. But you don't stop, because people are watching now. And once people start watching, it gets harder to walk away. You put pressure on yourself to keep performing. You feel like you can't slow down. You can't admit you're tired. You can't ask yourself if this is still what you want, because asking that would mean stepping off the stage. It would mean risking judgment. It would mean hearing people say, "I knew it wouldn't last." So you push harder. You burn out and call it hustle. You compare yourself constantly. Even when you win, it doesn't last. You look at who's doing more, who's getting more attention, who's getting further faster. You tell yourself you should be there by now. You should be bigger. You should be better. And even when you hit your goals, you feel like you're behind. Because the finish line always moves. Because it was never your finish line to begin with. This version of success isn't built on clarity. It's built on noise. It's a reaction. You're reacting to your past, to your pain, to your insecurity. You're not moving forward. You're running from something. And that kind of success never satisfies. Because no amount of praise can heal a wound you won't look at. Think about who you're trying to impress. Not just in theory, in real life. Go back to the moment that lit the fire. Was it a teacher who made you feel invisible? A parent who only noticed your grades? A friend who laughed when you said your dream out loud? A boss who underestimated you? A sibling who always seemed one step ahead? That's who you're performing for. That's who you're trying to beat. Even now, you carry that person in your head, and every achievement is aimed at them. But here's the truth. They're not watching. Or if they are, they don't care the way you want them to. They're busy with their own performance. And yet, you keep living your life like it's a message to them. Like they get to decide if it means something. You say you want freedom, but success like this isn't freedom. It's another cage, a shinier one. One with applause instead of bars. You still can't move how you want to. You still can't rest. You still can't be honest. Because everything you do is built to impress people who will never give you what you're really looking for. You don't need everyone to believe in you. You need to believe in yourself enough to stop performing. To let go of the fantasy that one more win will make it all feel worth it. That if you just get a little more recognition, the ache will go away. It won't. Not like that. You don't need louder success. You need truer success. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that still matters when no one claps. The kind that comes from choosing your own path. Not because it'll impress anyone, but because it feels like home. But you won't find that path if you keep building your life around resentment. If you keep chasing goals to prove something. If you keep pretending that satisfaction is one more win away. You have to let go of the need to be seen a certain way. You have to stop trying to change the minds of people who never saw you clearly in the first place. You have to stop living like your success is a message. It's not. It's your life. And you only get one. So stop performing it. Start living it. Pain stays longer than the lesson. That's the part no one says out loud. People talk about growth. They say everything happens for a reason. They try to turn pain into meaning, and maybe that helps. But deep down, you know the truth. The pain sticks. It sticks longer than the wisdom, longer than the clarity, longer than the so-called silver lining. You go through something hard, and everyone rushes to find the purpose. They ask what you've learned, what you'll take away from it. As if that makes it worth it. As if the hurt becomes useful if you can just explain it well enough. But pain doesn't work like that. It doesn't care about your progress. It doesn't follow a clean arc. You can get the lesson and still feel wrecked. You can grow and still carry the weight. You don't remember the moment the lesson clicked. You remember the moment it all fell apart. You remember the tone of their voice, the way the air changed, the way your body felt when you knew something was ending. You remember the dread, not the insight, the silence, not the breakthrough. You remember the tears, the questions that didn't get answered, the part of you that went quiet and stayed that way. You remember the breakup more than what it taught you about love. You remember the betrayal more than what it taught you about trust. You remember the failure more than what it taught you about resilience. You carry the pain like a bruise you still check in the mirror, even though the lesson has already faded. You want to move on, but pain doesn't move on just because you do. It lingers. It shows up in strange places. You flinch at certain words. You pull back when things get too close. You downplay your needs. You tell yourself you've healed, but the wound still shapes your choices. You learn not to say what you want. You learn not to ask twice. You learn how to read the room so you don't get caught off guard. You say you've learned to be strong, but what you've really learned is how to be on guard. That's not a lesson. That's defense. And it stays long after the event that caused it. People talk about pain like it's a teacher, and it can be, but it's also a thief. It steals your ease, your openness, your sense of safety. You get the lesson, but you lose something too, something softer, something you didn't know you needed until it was gone. You say you're wiser now, more careful, more grounded. But careful doesn't always mean better. Sometimes it just means scared. Sometimes the lesson isn't growth, it's caution. You touch the stove once and you never go near heat again. You tell yourself that's maturity, but it's not. It's memory. And the memory lives in your body more than your mind. It's in the way you hesitate before speaking, the way you hold back joy because you don't trust it to last, the way you prepare for disappointment even when things are going well. You think you're just being realistic, but you're not. You're reliving the past, not because you want to, but because pain has a longer shelf life than truth. Even when you've moved forward, part of you stays frozen in the old moment. You carry that version of yourself into every new situation. You carry the fear that it will happen again, that this person will leave too, that this opportunity will fall apart, that you'll be back in that same room with that same feeling in your chest. You try to be present, but part of you is still there. You don't talk about it because it sounds dramatic. You think you should be over it, so you try to package it as wisdom. You call it experience. You say, I've learned my lesson. But what you mean is, I haven't forgotten how much it hurt. The pain becomes the headline. The lesson becomes the footnote. You say you're grateful for what it taught you. But if you're honest, you'd give the lesson back if it meant you didn't have to go through it. You'd give back the insight in exchange for the time you lost, for the version of you that wasn't afraid, for the belief that good things could last without turning. You don't need another lesson. You need space to admit that the pain is still there, that some wounds don't turn into wisdom. Some just leave scars. And that's not weakness. That's just life. You can know what the pain taught you and still wish it hadn't come. You can grow and still grieve. You can be stronger now and still feel shaky. The lesson and the damage can live side by side. There are days when you remember the lesson, when you speak from it, when you help someone else through something similar. And for a moment, it feels worth it. But there are also days when you just feel the loss, when the lesson doesn't matter, when the only thing that feels real is the ache that's still tucked away in the corners of your mind. You try to make peace with it. You try to find closure. But pain doesn't always close. Sometimes it just quiets. It fades into the background. But even then, it shapes the way you move. You walk differently when you've been hurt. You build walls differently. You love differently. That's not all bad, but it's not neutral either. People will tell you to focus on the positive, to remember how much you've learned, to be proud of how far you've come. But you can't ignore what the pain took, and you shouldn't have to. You're allowed to hold both. You're allowed to remember what it cost. You're allowed to say the pain lasted longer than the lesson, and I'm still figuring out what that means. You say you want to grow. You say you want to change your life. You talk about improvement like it matters to you. You say things like, I want to be better, or I'm working on myself. But most of the time, you're not working. You're watching. You choose entertainment over growth. You say you want to learn, but you keep reaching for distraction. You say you want depth, but you settle for noise. You scroll through content labeled motivational or educational, but you don't apply it. You consume it the way someone watches a trailer. They like how it looks, but they never watch the full thing. You don't take notes. You don't pause to reflect. You don't change anything. You just nod along and keep scrolling. You treat growth like a mood, not a discipline. You follow creators who post insights, but you skip the parts that challenge you. You like the parts that sound good, the ones that tell you you're already doing enough. You replay the clips that affirm your view of yourself. You avoid the ones that tell you to stop making excuses. You want to feel inspired without doing the work. You confuse feeling something with becoming something. You say you don't have time to read, but you have time for shows. You say you're too tired to reflect, but not too tired to binge. You say you're decompressing. You say you're relaxing. And maybe you are. But night after night, you pick comfort over growth. You pick ease over effort. And then you wonder why things don't change. Growth isn't entertaining. It's slow. It's repetitive. It's frustrating. It asks you to face things you'd rather ignore. Entertainment is smooth. It's quick. It gives you the hit without the work. That's why it wins. Not because you don't care about growth, but because growth is quiet, and you've trained your mind to crave noise. You sit down to focus, but you check your phone 5 times in 10 minutes. You open a book, but you don't make it past the second page before you feel the urge to do something else. You tell yourself you're just restless, that you'll come back to it, but most of the time, you don't. Because the phone's easier, the video's easier, the post is shorter, the content is made to keep you hooked, not help you grow. You want results, but you avoid process. You want change, but you avoid challenge. You want to grow, but only if it's fun, only if it fits your schedule, only if it feels good in the moment. But that's not how growth works. It's not entertainment, it's not content, it's confrontation with your habits, with your beliefs, with your distractions. And you've built a life that keeps those things out of reach. You say you want to understand yourself, but when was the last time you sat in silence for more than 10 minutes? When was the last time you journaled without looking at the time? When was the last time you had a thought and followed it all the way to the end without checking for a notification? You don't want to be bored, but boredom is where growth starts. Boredom is space. It's the pause between distractions where your mind has a chance to tell you the truth. But you don't want the truth. You want stimulation. You want to feel engaged, not challenged. So you fill every gap with something, a video, a podcast, a playlist, anything to keep the silence out. You think growth is something that happens when you feel ready, but growth doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't wait for motivation. It waits for discipline. It waits for presence. And those things don't come from consuming more. They come from choosing less. Less comfort, less noise, less ease. Entertainment makes you passive. You sit back, you receive. Growth makes you active. You sit up, you work, you participate. It's the difference between watching someone lift and picking up the weight yourself. And most of the time you just watch. You call it research, you call it inspiration. But really, it's avoidance. You'd rather watch someone else do it than start your own set. You say you're trying, but trying means doing. Not just listening, not just liking, not just thinking about it. It means changing your routine. It means delaying gratification. It means making different choices even when no one sees them. Entertainment gives you the illusion of motion. You feel like you're doing something because your brain is busy, but you're not building anything. You're just consuming. And consumption without action leads to nothing. You feel full, but you haven't moved. You watch a clip about discipline, then skip to the next one. You nod along to a video about purpose, then go back to scrolling. You say you're taking it in, but nothing sticks because you don't sit with anything long enough to let it change you. You think growth will find you if you stay close to it, if you keep watching the people who talk about it. But watching isn't enough. Being near the work is not the same as doing the work. You have the tools, you have the access, you have more information than you need. But information without action turns into clutter. It becomes weight. You know what to do, you just don't do it. Because doing it means choosing discomfort, choosing effort, choosing stillness. And stillness doesn't feel good when you're used to being entertained, when you're used to the next thing, when your mind is trained to expect a dopamine hit every few seconds. Growth doesn't offer that. It offers something slower, something deeper. But only if you stay long enough to receive it. You won't grow by accident. You won't grow while waiting for life to get easier. You grow when you stop choosing what's easy every time, when you sit with boredom, when you pick the book instead of the scroll, when you trade noise for quiet, when you stop being a spectator and start building something with your own hands. You don't need another podcast. You don't need another highlight reel. You need to stop choosing entertainment every time it gets hard, every time it gets slow, every time it gets uncomfortable, because that's the moment growth is waiting for. And that's the moment you usually skip. You say you want peace. You say you're tired of the drama, the stress, the tension. You talk about stability like it's the goal, like it's what you've been searching for. But when things finally get quiet, you stir them up. You create problems where there aren't any. You go looking for trouble, even if you don't call it that. You're addicted to chaos. You sabotage peace because it doesn't feel natural. Chaos feels like home. You've lived with noise for so long that silence feels wrong. When things are calm, you don't trust it. You think something must be off. You wait for something to go wrong, and if nothing goes wrong, you make something go wrong. You pick a fight. You overthink. You create a crisis where there was none. You feel restless and calm because your nervous system doesn't recognize it. It feels foreign. It feels suspicious. It feels like waiting for the fall. Maybe you grew up around chaos, loud voices, unpredictable moods, constant stress. You learned early on to stay alert, to keep your guard up, to expect something bad around the corner. You didn't relax. You scanned the room. You braced yourself. And over time, that became your baseline. That became comfort. Not because it felt good, but because it felt familiar. Familiar felt safe. Now, as an adult, when life finally slows down, you feel uneasy. You think peace means you're slacking, that you've let your guard down, that something's about to sneak up on you. You say you want rest, but when you get it, you feel guilty. You say you want a break, but when things go well, you get bored, because part of you doesn't know what to do without stress. You don't know who you are without it. You create chaos in ways you don't notice. You procrastinate and then panic. You avoid hard conversations until they explode. You say yes to things you can't handle. You pick people who are unreliable. You chase situations that drain you. You act like these things just happen, like you're unlucky, like life keeps throwing you curveballs. But it's not life, it's you. You're repeating the pattern because it's what you know. You say you want healthy relationships, but healthy feels awkward. It feels boring. When someone treats you with calm and respect, you don't know what to do. You question their motives. You test them. You pull away. You pick fights to see how far you can push them. Because part of you equates love with instability, with intensity, with high stakes and emotional swings. If it's not hard, it doesn't feel real. You say you want peace of mind, but when your mind gets quiet, you fill it with noise. You create imaginary problems. You worry about things that haven't happened. You replay things that already passed. You scroll endlessly. You keep yourself overstimulated. Because being overstimulated is easier than being still. Stillness means facing what's under the surface, and you don't want that. You'd rather be in motion, even if the motion leads nowhere. You think chaos makes you sharp, like you perform better under pressure, like you're more alive when things are on fire. But that's just survival mode. It's not clarity. It's not focus. It's adrenaline. And adrenaline isn't wisdom. You've confused urgency with purpose. You've mistaken panic for energy. And now you don't know how to function without a looming deadline or a fight to fix or a problem to solve. You say you're just built different, that you thrive in chaos. But thriving isn't reacting fast. Thriving isn't recovering from the same damage over and over. Thriving is stability. It's strength that doesn't need crisis to prove itself. It's waking up and not feeling behind. It's trust, not tension. You keep peace at arm's length because you don't think you've earned it. Somewhere deep down, you believe peace is for other people. People who had easier lives. People who didn't mess up like you did. You think you need to pay some invisible debt before you can rest. So you keep yourself in motion. You keep suffering, as if suffering proves you're trying. But you don't owe anyone your suffering. You don't need to earn peace by staying broken. You just need to stop lighting fires and calling it warmth. Look at your days. Look at how many of your problems are self-inflicted. Look at how many things you could have prevented if you just paused, if you just said no, if you just asked for help instead of waiting for a meltdown. You create storms and then feel strong for surviving them, but you don't have to keep surviving. You're allowed to live. You won't feel peace right away. Not because it's not there, but because your body doesn't recognize it yet. At first, it'll feel wrong. It'll feel like something's missing, like you're forgetting something. That's withdrawal. That's your brain rewiring. It takes time. You have to sit through the discomfort without running back to the chaos. You're not broken. You're conditioned. You've trained yourself to respond to life like it's a battle. And now you think battles are normal. You think drama means depth, that struggle means meaning, but meaning doesn't come from struggle. It comes from intention, from alignment, from living on purpose, not in reaction. You have a choice. You can keep chasing chaos because it's what you know, or you can unlearn it slowly, quietly. You can teach your body that calm is not the enemy, that peace is not laziness, that rest is not weakness. You can stop making your life harder than it needs to be. But you have to want it more than you want the high that chaos gives you. You have to choose it when it feels strange. You have to sit with boredom, sit with stillness, sit with yourself, and not run. You can't heal in the same environment that hurt you. And if you keep building that environment out of habit, nothing changes. You'll keep saying you want peace, but peace won't stick if you keep pushing it away the moment it shows up. You think you're looking for love, but you're really looking for attention. You don't say it that way. You don't think of it that way, but it's what you chase. You want to be seen, not deeply, just noticeably. You want the message, the call, the like, the stare, the comment. You want someone to notice you, because that's the easiest way to feel wanted. Attention is quick. It's clear. It gives you a hit of something that feels close to love, even if it isn't. You get the text and your whole mood changes. You get the compliment and your confidence spikes. You get the reply, the laugh, the glance, and for a moment, you feel full. But it fades. And when it fades, you want more. You think you're chasing connection, but you're chasing a reaction. You're not asking, do they care about me? You're asking, are they looking at me? And when they are, it feels enough, until it isn't. You confuse attention with affection. You assume if someone pays attention, they must care. If they remember your name, if they text back fast, if they flirt, if they act interested. You take that and stretch it into meaning. You read between lines that aren't there. You turn gestures into promises. And when it falls apart, you feel blindsided. But you weren't blindsided. You just wanted it to mean more than it did. Attention is easy. It doesn't cost much. Anyone can give it. People hand it out when they're bored, when they're lonely, when they want something. You don't need to know someone to give them attention. You don't need to respect them. You don't need to care about their future. You just need to be available. You've built a system around attention. You know how to get it. You know how to hold it. You know what to post, what to say, how to look. You adjust yourself based on what draws eyes. You test responses. You analyze reactions. You collect moments that prove you're seen, and you call that love. But love doesn't look like that. Love shows up when there's nothing to gain, when no one's watching, when you're not performing. Love stays when things get boring, when things get hard, when there's no script to follow. Attention doesn't do that. Attention comes and goes. Love stays or leaves based on who someone is, not how entertained they are. You confuse affection with validation. Someone shows affection and it makes you feel valuable. You think their warmth means you're enough, but you don't feel enough without it. So you seek it. You fish for it. You need the reminder that you matter. You act like you want love, but you're trying to fix something deeper. Something that tells you you're not whole unless someone else confirms it. You say you want intimacy, but you pick people who give you just enough to keep you around. You say you want something real, but you stay in situations where you're always guessing, where the attention is inconsistent, where you get high off the chase and crash in the silence. That's not connection, that's addiction. And it runs you in circles. You act like you're being patient, like you're giving people time, but you're not. You're waiting for a fix, for the next hit of attention to settle your mind. You don't ask if the person is good for you. You ask if they still want you. And if they do, you stay, even if it hurts, even if it's hollow. You think affection means you're safe, but you don't feel safe. Not really. Because deep down, you know it's conditional. You know it can be taken away. You know it's based on what you do, not who you are. And that's why you work so hard to keep it. That's why you change yourself. That's why you don't speak up. You're scared the attention will go somewhere else. You don't trust that someone can see you fully and still stay. You trust performance, you trust chemistry, you trust intensity. But those things fade. And when they fade, you feel lost. You blame yourself. You think you messed it up. But the truth is, it was never love. It was just attention dressed up like something deeper. You can't build self-worth on someone else's interest, because interest shifts. And when it shifts, you feel like you're disappearing. You start to scramble. You reach out. You lower your standards. You shrink yourself to get the reaction back. You do things you said you wouldn't. You say things you don't mean. And then you feel worse. You call it heartbreak, but it's not. It's the pain of losing your mirror, the thing that made you feel like you existed. Without it, you feel like nothing. Not because you are, but because you haven't learned how to hold your own value. You have to stop chasing people who only reflect you when it suits them. You have to stop letting attention dictate your worth. You have to stop confusing curiosity with care, want with love, affection with truth. Start asking harder questions. Do they listen when it's not exciting? Do they show up when no one else sees? Do they care about your well-being or just their access to you? Do they make you feel more like yourself or more like someone you have to maintain? If you stop performing, do they stay? If you don't offer anything, do they still reach out? If you stop being easy to like, do they still try to know you? Those are the questions that matter. Because real love doesn't need a show. It doesn't ask for performance. It doesn't inflate and vanish. It bid holds. It stays when things get quiet. But you won't find it if you keep settling for attention. If you keep calling every spark a fire. If you keep mistaking affection for proof that you're enough. You were enough before they looked at you, before they touched you, before they said your name. You don't need their interest to confirm your value. You just need to stop giving it that power. You want to be free. You say that out loud. You say you don't want to live by anyone else's rules. You say you want to be your own person. You talk about authenticity, boundaries, choice. But when it comes down to it, you trade freedom for approval. Every time. You'd rather be liked than be free. You say yes when you mean no. You nod when you disagree. You hold your tongue. You adjust your tone. You soften your truth to keep the peace. You give people what they want from you, even when it costs you. Not because you believe it's right, but because you don't want to lose their affection. You want to be seen as good, as agreeable, as easy to like. You perform for approval. You put on the version of yourself that fits the room. You become who they need you to be. Around one person, you're chill. Around another, you're driven. Around another, you're deep. You adapt fast. You're good at it. And because you're good at it, you call it connection. But it's not. It's management. You're not building relationships. You're running a campaign. You say things you don't believe because you don't want to start something. You agree to things that drain you because you don't want to seem difficult. You apologize for things that aren't your fault because silence feels dangerous. You offer parts of yourself that you don't want to give because saying no feels rude. And then you tell yourself you're just being polite. You're just being kind, but it's not kindness, it's fear. You fear disapproval more than you value your own peace. You care more about being accepted than being whole. So you hide the parts of yourself that might make people uncomfortable. You mute your opinions, you downplay your needs, you shrink your joy. You carry shame for things that aren't wrong, just misunderstood. And you think that's normal. You think it's maturity, but it's not. It's self-abandonment. You live in a cage built from other people's comfort. You feel the weight of it in small ways. You say yes and feel the tension in your stomach. You laugh at something that doesn't sit right. You agree to plans and then hope they cancel. You don't speak up and then you can't sleep. You spend the whole day thinking about what you should have said, what you shouldn't have allowed. You wonder why you feel so tired, so out of place, so disconnected from your own life. This is why. Because freedom takes honesty, and you've replaced honesty with approval. You don't say what you mean. You don't ask for what you want. You wait to be invited. You wait to be chosen. You wait for someone to say it's okay to be yourself. But no one will give you that permission. That's your job, and you've been outsourcing it to everyone around you. You don't wear what you want to wear. You wear what you think they'll like. You don't create what calls to you. You create what you think will perform. You don't rest when you're tired. You keep going so no one sees you as lazy. You don't set limits. You keep giving because you're afraid of being called selfish. And you don't even realize how often you do it because it feels automatic now. It feels like survival. You think if people like you enough, you'll finally feel free. You think if you're accepted enough, you'll be safe to be yourself. But that's backwards. Approval won't make you free. It'll make you dependent. Because once you build your sense of self around being liked, you have to keep earning it. You have to keep performing. You have to keep guessing what people want from you and becoming it. And once you become it, they like it. But it's not you they like, it's the version, the act. And the more praise you get for the act, the more trapped you feel. Because now you've got something to lose. If you change, will they still like you? If you stop playing the part, will they walk away? That question keeps you stuck. Approval feels safe until it becomes a leash. You say you don't want to disappoint anyone, but you disappoint yourself all the time. You let yourself down to keep the room calm. You betray your own gut just to avoid an awkward pause. You silence your instincts so someone else doesn't have to feel challenged. And then you wonder why your life doesn't feel like yours. You're not living, you're auditioning. And the worst part is, it works. People like you. They think you're nice. They think you're easy. They say things like, "You're always so helpful," or "You're such a good listener." And you smile. You say thank you. You feel seen for a second. But inside, you feel fake. Because you know the version they love isn't the full you. It's the filtered you, the curated you, the compliant you. And maybe you've been doing it for so long, you don't even know where the mask ends. You don't know what you actually want, what you actually think, what you actually believe. Because you've spent so much time becoming what others expect that you never stop to build a self that stands on its own. You don't need to be liked by everyone. You need to be free. And freedom requires risk. It requires being misunderstood. It requires being disliked. Not because you're cruel, not because you're careless, but because people will always have expectations, and some of them will not fit you. Some of them will try to control you. And if you need their approval, they win. Freedom is not rebellion. It's not loud or dramatic. It's just choosing yourself over the performance. It's telling the truth, even when your voice shakes. It's saying no without guilt. It's letting someone be disappointed and not rushing to fix it. It's showing up as you are, without the need to manage every reaction. You can't be free and controlled at the same time. You have to pick. So ask yourself, who are you still trying to please? Whose opinion are you living for? Whose approval still feels like survival? And what would your life look like if you stopped performing for them? If you let go of needing to be liked, what would you choose? Whatever that answer is, that's you. The real you, the one who's still waiting to live. You fill your day with noise. You bounce from screen to screen, task to task, thought to thought. You scroll, you click, you binge, you repeat. You tell yourself you're just tired, just unwinding, just catching up. But what you're really doing is avoiding the thing that scares you the most. Silence. Stillness. The quiet space where everything rises up. The void. You don't call it that, but you know it's there. It shows up when the distractions fade, when the playlist ends, when the show finishes, when the messages stop. That moment between things, when nothing is pulling your attention. That's when it shows up. That hollow feeling, that deep discomfort, that quiet question, what's actually going on in me? You fear the void because it has no script, no distractions, no roles, nothing to perform, nothing to react to, nothing to prove, just you. And that's the part that scares you. Not being busy, not being seen, just being. You say you're overwhelmed, but you stay overloaded on purpose. You say you wish things would slow down, but when they do, you speed them back up. You invite distraction. You reach for your phone when you have 10 seconds to breathe. You check your email again, even though you checked it 2 minutes ago. You put on something in the background just so there's no silence. You keep your mind occupied because you don't want to see what's behind it. You tell yourself it's harmless, but it's not. It's a habit. And like all habits, it rewires you. It trains you to avoid, to escape, to depend on the next thing to keep you from having to feel what's actually inside you. You think you're just staying busy, but really, you're running. And you've been running for a long time. The void holds everything you've pushed down, every question you haven't answered, every emotion you haven't faced, every truth you keep dodging. It's where the fear lives, the shame, the doubt, the memories you didn't process, the parts of you you don't show to anyone. And because you don't want to feel those things, you bury them under stimulation. You keep moving so you don't have to feel stuck. You keep watching so you don't have to think. You keep talking so you don't have to listen to yourself. But underneath all of it, the void waits. It doesn't chase you. It doesn't yell. It just waits. You think you're escaping it, but you're not. You're building your life around it. You make plans to avoid it. You set goals to outrun it. You call your distraction productivity or self-care or entertainment, but it's just another layer between you and the truth. And the truth is this: there's a part of you that feels empty. Not broken, not bad, just hollow. Like something's missing, like something got lost along the way. Maybe it was joy, maybe it was trust, maybe it was purpose. Whatever it was, you've been trying to fill the space with anything that will keep you from having to notice it's there. But nothing fills it for long. That's why you always want more. More content, more stimulation, more conversation, more ambition. You don't know how to sit in the quiet, so you make sure you're never in it. It's not that you don't care about depth, you do. You talk about growth, you like the idea of clarity, of peace, but peace only comes after stillness. And stillness requires facing the void, not running from it, not numbing it, facing it. You can't fix what you won't feel. You can't heal what you won't see. And you won't find peace while avoiding your own presence. It's not about removing all distractions. It's about recognizing why you reach for them. You reach for them when things get too quiet, when the feelings get too real, when the truth starts to surface. That's when you panic. That's when the scrolling kicks in. That's when you lose another hour to nothing. You say you're waiting for the right time, but the right time won't feel comfortable. It won't come wrapped in clarity. It will come disguised as boredom, as a restless moment in the middle of a Tuesday, as a question you can't ignore anymore. And that's when the work begins. Sitting with the void doesn't mean collapsing into it. It means acknowledging it, naming it, allowing it. You don't have to figure it all out at once. You just have to stop running from it. You have to stop filling every second of your life so you don't have to feel your own depth. You avoid the void because you think it's dangerous. But it's not. It's just unfamiliar. And unfamiliar doesn't mean unsafe. It just means unexplored. You've been trained to equate silence with absence. But silence is where truth lives, where healing begins, where you meet the parts of yourself you've kept at arm's length. There's nothing in the void that will destroy you. The pain won't destroy you. The sadness won't destroy you. The fear won't destroy you. But hiding from them will. Pretending they don't exist will. Distracting yourself until years go by, that's what hurts you. That's what keeps you stuck in a cycle of consumption and emptiness. The void is where your real questions live. What do I want? What am I avoiding? What would happen if I stopped trying to be everything for everyone else? What would be left if I stopped performing? The answers aren't fast. They don't come wrapped in language. They come in feelings, in silence, in sitting with discomfort long enough to see what's underneath it. But that's where your life begins, not the life you perform, the life that's actually yours, the one you keep postponing because you're scared of what might happen when the noise stops. Let it stop. Let the silence in. Let the void speak. Not forever. Just long enough to hear yourself again. You think your thoughts are your own. You believe your opinions come from reflection. You trust that the way you think, feel, choose belongs to you. But it doesn't. Your mind is not private. Your attention is not free. Someone profits from everything that goes through your head. Your mind is monetized. You don't notice it because it doesn't feel like selling. It feels like scrolling. It feels like watching. It feels like browsing, liking, reacting. But every tap, every pause, every second you spend looking at a screen, someone tracks it, someone studies it, someone shapes your experience to keep you looking longer. And the longer you look, the more they earn. You're not the customer, you're the product. Your attention is what's being bought and sold. And every app, every feed, every platform is designed to hold that attention hostage. You think you're in control because you can choose what you click. But what shows up isn't random. It's not a reflection of your taste. It's a reflection of your behavior. You're being fed content that keeps you there. Not content that helps you think. Not content that makes you better. Just content that hooks you. You think you're scrolling for fun, but you're being studied. You think you're watching for 5 minutes, but an hour disappears. And when it does, you don't just lose time. You lose space in your own mind. You don't even realize what's being written into you, because the message isn't loud, it's subtle. It's in what gets repeated. It's in what goes viral. It's in the tone, the angle, the rhythm. You don't ask where your thoughts come from. You don't ask why certain stories catch your attention, why certain emotions rise up when you see certain headlines. You don't ask how your opinions formed, you just defend them. You repeat ideas you didn't question. You mimic takes you didn't research. You hold strong positions on things you haven't lived. You assume they're yours, but they're borrowed, fed to you, not through force but through design. The goal isn't to inform you, the goal is to engage you, to keep your eyes open and your mind occupied. That's what makes money. That's what fuels the system. Outrage works, division works, conflict works, emotion wins. And the louder you get inside your head, the less likely you are to notice what's happening outside of it. You're encouraged to form quick opinions, to react before reflecting, to take sides before asking questions. And the more you react, the more predictable you become. The system doesn't need you to think, it needs you to respond, because responses can be tracked, predicted, sold. You say you're tired, but you keep picking up the phone. You say you want peace, but you keep refreshing your feed. You say you're overwhelmed, but you can't stop clicking. That's not accident. That's the result of systems designed to override your attention. Systems built to hijack your nervous system. Systems trained to create craving. You're not choosing to be distracted. You're conditioned. Even when you're not online, it's still running. You think about what you saw. You carry it. You talk about it. You compare yourself to it. You live in it. You look at your own life through its lens. Is this interesting enough? Is this worth posting? What will they think? You don't ask if you like it. You ask if it will get a response. You perform your life, then wait for feedback. You craft your identity, then watch the numbers. You call it connection. But most of the time, it's just exposure. You put yourself out there and you hope it pays off. In likes, in reach, in status. You participate in a system that tells you your worth is tied to how visible you are. You think your life belongs to you, but your attention belongs to them. And they've built a world that makes escape feel impossible. You pick up your phone without thinking. You open apps without meaning to. You consume content without noticing. And every time you do, you train your brain to need more of it. This isn't about shame. This isn't about guilt. It's about clarity. You can't make honest choices if you don't understand the system you're in. You can't reclaim your thoughts if you don't know they've been borrowed. You can't live freely if you don't realize you're being programmed. You don't have to delete everything, but you do have to wake up. You have to see how deep the hooks go, how often you fill silence with someone else's noise, how often your peace is interrupted by a screen, how rarely your thoughts come from stillness, and how often they come from the feed. Ask yourself, when was the last time I sat with a thought that wasn't handed to me? When was the last time I changed my mind? Not because I saw a post, but because I asked a better question. When was the last time I was bored on purpose? silent on purpose, present on purpose. You won't hear yourself clearly until you step away from what's shaping your voice. You won't know what's true for you until you stop repeating what's been suggested. Your mind is not a slot machine. Your attention is not a toy. Your thoughts are not a business model. But right now, they've been turned into one. And the only way out is awareness, not performance, not outrage, just presence. Stop feeding a system that profits from your exhaustion. Stop believing every idea that gets the most attention. Start asking who benefits from what you believe, who profits from how you spend your time, who gains when your mind is too crowded to think for itself. They don't need you to believe in the system. They just need you to keep using it, quietly, constantly. But you can choose differently. You can slow down. You can close the app. You can take a breath and decide what deserves space in your mind. Because that space is not for sale. Not unless you give it away. You think you're the hero of your story. You believe your choices make sense. You trust your intentions. You tell yourself you're doing your best, and maybe you are. But that doesn't change the fact that you're the villain in someone else's story. You're the one they remember with tension in their chest, the one they bring up in therapy, the one they still don't understand or forgive. You don't see it that way because you have your reasons. You know what led to the choice. You know what you meant. You know you didn't mean to hurt anyone. But what you meant doesn't erase what happened. And what you remember doesn't match what they felt. You told a joke that landed wrong, but you never followed up. You forgot a moment that they replayed for years. You defended yourself in a fight and didn't notice what it cost them. You made a decision that worked for you and left them to carry the fallout. You weren't evil, you weren't cruel. But in their version of the story, you're the one who caused the damage. You think they should understand you. You think they should see the full picture. But no one ever sees the full picture. They see what you showed them. They feel what you triggered in them. They carry the version of you that existed in the moment they needed you most and didn't get what they needed. Maybe you disappeared without explanation. Maybe you said too much. Maybe you didn't say enough. Maybe you were trying to protect yourself. Maybe you were trying to keep the peace. But to them, it felt like betrayal or dismissal or punishment. And they stopped seeing you as a person with a reason. They started seeing you as the reason. You can't control that. You don't get to rewrite their memory. You don't get to decide what hurt and what didn't, just like people can't rewrite yours. You have your villains too. People who still live in your mind as unfinished stories. You've told yourself they were selfish, or careless, or weak. You've made sense of your pain by making them the problem. You don't remember how they were struggling. You don't know what they were carrying. You only know what you felt. That's the nature of stories. We write them from our perspective. And from your perspective, you did your best. But your best didn't feel like enough to someone else. And they live with the version of you that failed them. That version might be exaggerated, it might be unfair, but it's still real to them. It still shaped how they moved forward, how they learned to trust or not trust, how they protect themselves now. You're a character in that story, not the main one, just the one who changed something they didn't want changed. You don't have to hate yourself to accept this. You just have to be honest. You've hurt people, not because you're a monster, because you're human, because you were trying to figure things out while someone else was hoping you already had, because you were tired, because you didn't know better, because you were scared or selfish or just distracted. You won't know the exact moment it happened. You won't feel like a villain. That's the hard part. You think being a villain means being obvious, but it's quieter than that. It's missing a call. It's forgetting a promise. It's choosing distance when they needed closeness. It's saying, that's not my responsibility, when it felt like abandonment to them. You want to be seen for your growth, but some people can't unsee the version of you that hurt them. You moved on, you grew, you figured things out, but they didn't get that version of you. They got the one who wasn't ready, the one who didn't show up, the one who didn't know what they know now. And sometimes you can't fix that. Apologies don't always land. Explanations don't always matter. Time doesn't always soften the memory. You're not entitled to forgiveness. You're not owed a clean ending. Sometimes your story overlaps with someone else's in a way that leaves a mark, and you never get to go back and do it better. You want to believe that being misunderstood is unfair, that your heart should count for something, but intentions don't erase outcomes. And pain doesn't cancel out just because you didn't mean it. There are people who remember you as the one who complicated everything, the one who didn't care, the one who took more than they gave. And no matter how you explain it, they won't hear it. Not because they're bitter, because the pain speaks louder than your reasons. You don't have to chase their approval. You don't have to beg for their understanding. But you do have to carry the truth. You were someone's bad experience, someone's lesson, someone's reason for building a wall. That doesn't make you evil, but it makes you responsible, not for their healing, but for your awareness. You don't get to be the hero in every version of the story. You don't get to control how people remember you. You only get to decide what you do next, who you choose to become after seeing the damage. Whether you listen when someone says, "You hurt me," whether you take that in or turn away. You'll never know how many times your name came up in a story you'll never hear. You won't know how deeply a small moment shaped someone's trust. But if you assume you've never been the villain, you're lying to yourself. You can do better. You can be better. But only if you're willing to admit that being the main character in your life doesn't make you the hero in someone else's. It just makes you human, flawed, remembered, misunderstood, and still capable of change. You say you want change. You say you're ready for a new life, new habits, a new version of yourself. You write goals. You talk about growth. You watch content that gets you inspired. You plan. You make lists. You imagine what it would be like to finally be who you're supposed to be. But when it comes time to act, you stall. You shrink. You get busy. You go quiet. You fear real change. Not because it might fail, but because it might work. You've built an identity around your current struggle. It's familiar. You know how to talk about it. You know how to live inside it. It gives you a story. It gives you a reason. It explains why you feel stuck, why you haven't done more, why you're still here. If that story ends, what do you say then? Who are you without it? Real change threatens that identity. It asks you to become someone you don't fully know yet, someone who might think differently, walk differently, choose differently. It asks you to let go of the comfort that comes from your own problems. And yes, even problems can be comfortable, especially when they're predictable. If you change, you can't keep blaming the same things. You can't say, "I've just always been this way." You can't fall back on, "I'm working on it," if the work is done. You can't use chaos or confusion as a shield. You'd have to face life without those excuses. And that's terrifying. You think you fear failure, but you've failed before and survived. What you really fear is success, because success would change everything. It would cost you certain relationships, certain patterns, certain coping mechanisms. It would change how you see yourself and how others see you. You're not sure you're ready for that. You say you want to be confident, but if you were, you'd have to stop hiding. You'd have to take up space. You'd have to say what you mean and deal with how people react. You'd have to stop playing small. And there's a safety in smallness. It keeps the spotlight off you. It keeps expectations low. Confidence sounds good in theory, but living it would cost you your cover. You say you want to heal, but healing would mean giving up the version of yourself who gets a pass for being in pain. It would mean showing up more fully. It would mean letting go of the stories that have protected you. And it would mean losing the attention, the care, the identity that came with your struggle. You don't know who you'd be without the ache, so you hold on to it. You say you want discipline, but if you were disciplined, you wouldn't have the excuse of being overwhelmed. You wouldn't have the chaos to blame. You'd have to own your choices. You'd have to be consistent. And consistency sounds boring when you're used to swinging between extremes. It's easier to chase energy than build structure. It's easier to say, "I'm not ready," than to act like you are. You say you want to speak your truth, but you fear the silence that might follow, the disapproval, the shift, the loss. You like the idea of being honest, but not if it means losing people who only love the version of you that's agreeable, edited, manageable. You want truth and safety, but real change doesn't give you both. You hold on to the old version of yourself, not because it's working, but because it's known. You'd rather be uncomfortable in what you understand than risk the unknown. You say you're stuck, but you're not. You're resisting. You've imagined the change. You've outlined the steps. You just haven't moved. Because you're not just afraid of falling short, you're afraid of what you'd lose if you didn't. If you let go of the habit, what would you do with the space it leaves behind? If you stopped numbing, what would you have to feel? If you stopped chasing chaos, what would happen to the identity you built on surviving it? Change is loss, not always in dramatic ways. Sometimes it's the loss of comfort, the loss of patterns, the loss of the story you told yourself about who you are. And even if that story hurt you, it still shaped you. You grieve it, even if you don't realize that's what you're doing. That's why you keep cycling. You take one step forward and then turn back. You start something and then let it fade. You make a little progress and then find a reason to stop. Not because you're lazy, not because you're weak, but because part of you is still attached to the old version of life, the one where you're struggling, searching, trying. You've romanticized the process. You love the idea of becoming, but becoming requires letting go. And letting go means something has to die, not literally, but emotionally, mentally, internally. Some version of you has to stop existing to make room for what's next. And death, even metaphorical, brings fear. You don't need more motivation. You don't need another plan. You need to admit what you're afraid to lose. You need to say it out loud. The comfort, the identity, the attention, the relationships, the story, the excuse, the shield. That's what's holding you back, not the work, not the risk, the grief, the cost, the reality that becoming new means becoming unfamiliar to yourself and to everyone else. Change is not a single decision. It's a series of small deaths. You outgrow your patterns, you shed your defenses, you give up your favorite escapes, you stop feeding your fears. You choose something else again and again, even when the old version of you begs you to go back. That version of you knows how to survive, but survival isn't the same as freedom. And deep down, you don't want survival anymore. You want more. You just haven't decided what you're willing to lose to get it. You say you know yourself. You say you're self-aware. You list your traits. You know your Myers-Briggs. You've taken the tests. You've read the charts. You have a language for your patterns. You can explain your past, your fears, your habits. But most of what you call you is just a version you perform, a version you built to be accepted, to be safe, to be liked. You don't know the real you. You know the rehearsed you, the edited you, the you that fits into rooms. The one who knows what to say, when to say it, and how to say it so nobody pulls away. You've practiced that version for so long, it feels natural now. But natural isn't the same as real. Real takes more than repetition. Real takes honesty, and honesty's been buried under performance. You learned early on how to become what people needed. Maybe you were the reliable one, the smart one, the calm one, the funny one. You figured out what role worked, and you stuck with it. You reinforced it with your choices, your tone, your silence. You got good at being that person. You got praised for it, so you kept going. You turned it into identity. Now, years later, you say, this is just how I am. But you never stopped to ask where that you came from, who chose it, who approved it, what it cost. You don't question it because it works. It gets results, it gets reactions, it gets love, or what feels close enough. You think being known means sharing facts. You tell people your history, your preferences, your struggles. But that's not the real you. That's the story, the version you've shaped, the one you manage. You show people the parts of you that are easy to understand, the parts you've already explained to yourself. You don't show them the pieces that don't fit the script. You don't let the mess leak out. You've performed the same identity for so long that any sign of contradiction makes you uncomfortable. You feel the tension between what you say and what you feel, and you cover it up. You say you're calm, but you're full of rage. You say you're chill, but you're anxious every day. You say you don't need much, but you're desperate to be seen. You act like you're fine because that's what people expect. But underneath, there's a version of you you've never let out. You stay in character even when you're alone. That's how deep it goes. You think about what you'd post before you think about how you feel. You imagine how your decisions will look before you ask if they're honest. You dress for the room in your head. You speak to the imagined audience. You give answers that keep things moving. Safe. Predictable. You don't ask what you actually want. You ask what sounds good, what looks impressive, what people like you are supposed to want. You confuse preference with pattern. You think comfort means truth, but most of your comfort comes from familiarity. And familiarity isn't the same as freedom. You say you're authentic, but what you really mean is consistent. Consistent with the image, the tone, the role. You think not changing is strength, but it's not. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's a refusal to meet the version of you hiding underneath the one you've built. The real you is underneath all that, but you don't visit them often. You don't give them room to speak. You keep the noise going so they stay quiet. You keep the performance tight so nothing slips through. You keep moving so you don't have to notice how disconnected you feel from your own life. You can feel it in moments, late at night, in silence, when you stop scrolling, when the conversation ends, when you're alone in a room and no one needs anything. That's when you feel the space, the distance, the gap between the you the world sees and the you that's still waiting to be seen. You say you want to be known, but you don't share what's unknown to you. You can't, so you keep the performance going. You keep handing people the version you know how to explain, and you wonder why connection feels thin, why relationships feel off, why your own life feels like a loop. You're not fake. You're not lying. You're just caught in a script that worked once and now won't let go. You became the version that made sense in the past, the one that helped you survive. But you're not there anymore. You've outgrown the part. You just haven't stepped off the stage. You fear that if you stop performing, no one will stay. You think people love the version you show, not the person you are. And maybe that's true for some. But if you never try, you'll never know. You'll just keep building relationships on performance, wondering why they leave you feeling hollow. You can't meet the real you in front of a crowd. You have to meet them in silence, in reflection, in small moments when you stop performing, when you sit with a feeling without naming it, when you make a choice that doesn't match the brand, when you say no without explaining, when you say yes without checking if it's the right thing to say. The real you isn't flashy, isn't polished, isn't branded. They're buried under the layers of who you thought you had to be. They're awkward, messy, curious, honest, and they're still there, still waiting for space, still hoping you'll come back. But you won't find them by thinking. You won't find them by optimizing your identity. You'll find them when you stop trying to be understood, when you stop needing to be right, when you let yourself exist without an audience, without a purpose, without a point. You say you want to be real. Start by noticing where you're not. Start by looking at the choices you make out of habit, out of fear, out of performance. Start by asking, if no one was watching, what would I choose? If I didn't have to stay consistent, what would I change? You don't have to kill the version you've performed. You just have to stop letting it be the only version you show. You don't owe anyone your character. You owe yourself your truth. And the truth is this: you don't know the real you yet. But you can. You fear death. You don't talk about it often, but it lingers. You think about how fast time moves. You think about aging. You think about regrets. You say you want more time, more meaning, more life. But if you look at how you live, it tells a different story. You fear death, but you live like you're already dead. You move through your day like a ghost. You follow routines without questioning them. You wake up, go through the motions, end the day, and repeat. You respond instead of act. You consume instead of create. You distract instead of engage. You're not really choosing your life, you're just surviving it. You tell yourself you'll change soon. You'll do the thing you care about when things settle down. You'll take the trip, write the book, have the conversation, start the project, fix the mess. Later, but later keeps moving. You treat your life like it has unlimited time. You treat your days like they're disposable. Like you can waste them now and somehow make them count later. But they don't stack up. You don't get to trade 100 empty days for one meaningful one. And deep down, you know that. That's what makes the stillness so uncomfortable. That's why you keep reaching for distractions. That's why you can't sit in silence for long. The silence reminds you that time is passing, that you're alive but not really living. You avoid risks. You avoid hard conversations. You avoid effort that might not pay off. You avoid anything that makes you uncomfortable, and you call that safety. But it's not safety, it's stagnation. It's the slow rot of potential. You've mistaken fear for wisdom. You've mistaken caution for maturity. But what you're really doing is shrinking your life to fit what you already know. You say you want meaning, but you never make space for it. You say you want depth, but you skim the surface of everything. You scroll through the hours. You fill every gap with noise. You chase comfort like it's a prize. You've made your life quiet and padded, but also hollow. You've muted the risk, and with it, the joy. You live like you're preparing for something. Like one day, things will start, but this is it. This is your life, these habits, these days, these thoughts. This is the material you're building your story with, and you're building something lifeless, something passive, something forgettable. You fear death, but death isn't just the end of breath. Death is repetition without reflection. It's routine without presence. It's movement without direction. It's days spent not doing what matters because it's easier to do what's familiar. You play it safe, but you're not safe. You're numb. You don't feel much anymore. Not deeply, not fully. You don't cry when something matters. You don't laugh from your gut. You don't pause when something's beautiful. You don't say what you mean when it counts. You don't tell people you love them in a way that lands. You've become efficient, polished, controlled. And it's killing you slowly. You fear death, but you're not afraid of dying. You're afraid of dying with regret, of realizing you said later one too many times, of realizing you kept your life on hold for so long that you forgot how to start it. You tell yourself you're too busy, you're too tired, you're waiting for clarity. But what you're really doing is waiting for a life that feels safe and meaningful and certain. One that comes with no risk and no loss. That life doesn't exist. The life you want is waiting on the other side of 1,000 uncomfortable moments, and you keep dodging every single one. You don't ask yourself hard questions anymore. You don't look at what's not working. You don't admit when you're unhappy. You don't take responsibility for the gap between your life and your potential. You just drift. You pretend drifting is peace, but it's just fear with a nice filter. You fear death, but you've already let your dreams die. You've already buried the version of you that used to care more. You put them to rest the day you started settling. The day you said, this is just how life is. The day you started saying fine instead of true. You still have time, but not as much as you think. The people around you won't always be there. The window for some of your goals will close. The parts of you that are still alive will grow quiet if you keep ignoring them. You don't get to press pause on your life and come back when you're ready. Time doesn't wait. You fear death, but what if the real fear is waking up 5 years from now and realizing nothing changed? Same patterns, same excuses, same sleepwalking through your own days. You talk about purpose, but you don't build it. You talk about truth, but you don't speak it. You talk about change, but you don't make it. You already know what matters to you. You already know what needs to go. You already know what kind of life would feel real again. You just haven't moved toward it. Not because it's too far, but because the first step feels like a funeral. Like saying goodbye to everything that's kept you safe. And it is. It's a death, but it's the right kind, the kind that leads to something new. You fear death, but you've stopped living. You're holding a match, standing next to a fire, and saying you want warmth. You have what you need, but you have to risk the burn. You have to stop waiting for the fear to leave before you move. You have to start living now, because anything else is just a slower way to die. You wake up, go through your routine, check your phone, check your email, check off tasks. You move through the day, you answer messages, you handle what's in front of you, you keep up, you respond, you don't fall apart. You call that living, but it's not. You've mistaken survival for life. You survive well, you've made it work. You've figured out how to function even when things feel off. You get things done, you hold things together. You do what needs to be done, even when you feel disconnected. That's not failure, that's a skill. But just because you're surviving doesn't mean you're living. Living takes more than presence, more than participation. Living means being awake in your own life, being honest, being connected to what you do and why you do it. Most days, you're not connected. You're performing, you're producing, you're reacting, you're solving problems and avoiding anything that doesn't scream for your attention. You move from task to task without stopping to ask if the direction makes sense. You meet deadlines, you answer calls, you show up to the job, the relationship, the conversation, but part of you never arrives. You're there, but dulled. You're going through motions. You're doing what's required to keep everything afloat. You think that's what life is supposed to feel like. You think being tired all the time is normal. You think feeling empty by the end of the week just means you've worked hard. You treat your body like a machine and your time like debt. You give your energy away like it costs nothing. You postpone joy. You say not yet to the things you care about. You tell yourself you'll live more once things calm down, but things never calm down. You just get used to the chaos. You stopped asking what lights you up. You stopped exploring what excites you. You stopped making space for curiosity. You said it was a phase. You said you got older. You said responsibilities came first. But what you really did was forget. You forgot how to live and started to cope. You call it maturity, but it's resignation. You plan your week based on what you have to do, not what you want to. You build your life around needs, not desires. You track progress, but ignore purpose. You settle for less and call it being realistic. You silence your needs and call it strength. You've gotten good at making it through, good at adapting, good at taking the hit and keeping your face calm. You make jokes about how tired you are. You bond with people over your stress. You keep it moving. Because if you slow down, if you stop performing your own stability, it all feels too fragile. Survival looks like discipline, but it's often fear. Fear of losing control, fear of letting people down, fear of admitting how disconnected you feel. You wake up in the morning and brace yourself before the day even begins. You tell yourself to push through and you do. But nothing changes. The finish line keeps moving, and all your energy goes to getting by. You don't let yourself feel too much. You don't let yourself hope too much. You don't take risks unless they're calculated. You say you want to grow, but you avoid uncertainty. You say you want change, but you stay where it's predictable. That's survival, not life. Living means opening. It means asking harder questions. It means admitting what isn't working. It means letting go of strategies that helped you survive but now keep you small. It means doing things that don't look impressive but feel true. It means being honest when you're tired. It means saying no when you want to. It means not apologizing for needing rest, space, joy, time. You've learned how to endure. But endurance isn't the goal. You weren't made just to push through. You weren't made to perform functionality. You weren't made to carry weight alone and call that strength. You were made to feel, to connect, to live in color, not grayscale. You keep waiting for permission to enjoy your life, for a clear moment when the pressure lifts and you can finally breathe. But that moment won't arrive. Not because it's impossible, but because you've built a system that doesn't allow it. You don't give yourself breaks. You don't protect your peace. You say you'll rest, but you only do when you crash. That's not rest. That's collapse. Living means taking up space in your own life again. Not just performing the parts that get praise. Not just showing the version that looks put together. Living means doing things that matter to you, even if no one else sees them. Even if no one else understands. You don't need a major breakthrough. You need presence. You need truth. You need to notice where you've gone numb, where you've gone silent, where you've traded freedom for control, where you've chosen survival over feeling alive. You know what that shift feels like. You've had glimpses. You've had those rare moments, laughing without holding back, talking without editing, resting without guilt. The moments when something in you relaxes, when you're not trying to win, fix, or prove anything, when you're just in it. That's life. Not the performance of having it together, not the avoidance of anything uncertain. Life is messy. Life is not optimized. Life is full of risk and beauty and questions and breath. You can't live fully if you're always bracing for the worst. You can't feel joy if you're always looking for the exit. You can't find meaning in a life you never show up for. You've made it this far by surviving. That's real. That counts. But it's not the same thing as living. Living begins where performance ends. It begins when you let go of the version of yourself that knows how to push through and start building the version that knows how to be here. Really here. Alive, not just functioning. Whole, not just holding it together. Present, not just passing time. You say you want the truth. You say you care about facts. You say honesty matters to you. But when the truth starts to challenge your story, you flinch. You shut down. You get defensive. You reject anything that makes you question how you see yourself, your past, your choices. You want the truth, as long as it doesn't hurt your narrative. You've built a version of your life that makes sense to you. It explains why things turned out the way they did. It explains your pain, your behavior, your patterns. You tell yourself, this is how I am because of what happened to me. And maybe that's partly true, but truth doesn't stop where you want it to. It keeps going. And the part that comes after your version, the part that complicates it, challenges it, questions it, that's the part you avoid. You say you want to grow, but growth only happens when you let new information in, when you let someone tell you something you don't want to hear. When you sit with the discomfort of being wrong or selfish or blind to something you should have seen. You say you're open-minded, but you only listen to the people who agree with you. You only believe the evidence that confirms what you already think. That's not growth, that's control. You call it boundaries, but sometimes it's just avoidance. You call it peace, but sometimes it's just denial. You don't want to face the truth about the role you played. You don't want to look at how your actions affected someone else. You want to believe you were doing your best. You want to believe your motives were pure. You want to believe they misunderstood you. But sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they saw clearly, and you're the one who's still trying to rewrite the story. You reject inconvenient truths because they don't match the version of you that you want to protect. The version that always meant well. The version that didn't know better. The version that was just reacting. But that version isn't the full picture. You made choices. You avoided things you should have faced. You said things you can't take back. You caused pain even when you didn't mean to. And that matters. You don't want to believe you're the one who hurt someone. You want to believe they were too sensitive, too confused, too closed off. But sometimes you were the one who didn't listen. Sometimes you were the one who shut them out. You want to believe you were justified. But justification isn't truth. It's a defense. And the more you defend yourself, the less room you give the truth to show up. You want to be seen as good. That's what gets in the way. You think admitting the full truth means admitting you're bad. But truth doesn't deal in labels, it deals in facts. And the fact is, you've done things that don't align with the person you say you are. Everyone has. The question isn't whether it happened. The question is whether you're willing to see it without running from it. You reject inconvenient truths because you think they'll undo you, but they won't. They'll clarify you. They'll make you honest. They'll take off the pressure of maintaining an image. You don't have to be right all the time. You just have to be willing to see when you're wrong. You curate your relationships to protect your view of yourself. You surround yourself with people who won't challenge you. You stay close to people who see you how you want to be seen, not how you actually are. You avoid the friend who speaks directly. You distance yourself from the one who doesn't let you off the hook. You say they're negative, or dramatic, or exhausting, but maybe they just stopped feeding your narrative. Maybe they told you the truth and you weren't ready for it. You block out feedback and then complain about feeling misunderstood. You ignore your part in the conflict and call it betrayal. You skip over the hard part of the conversation and call it closure. You don't want truth. You want a version of it that keeps your identity intact. You fear truth that changes the story. Truth that makes you revisit a memory and see it differently. Truth that makes you realize you weren't as helpless as you told yourself. That you had a choice. That you looked away. That you benefited from something you now claim to hate. That maybe you weren't a victim the whole time. You filter the truth through your comfort. If it fits, you accept it. If it stings, you discard it. That's not wisdom. That's self-protection. You stay in echo chambers where your beliefs go unchallenged. You repost things that validate your pain, but delete the ones that press on your pride. You say you're learning, but you only learn what flatters you. The truth doesn't owe you comfort. It doesn't adjust itself to fit your self-image. Sometimes the truth makes you smaller, humbles you, strips away your justifications. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. You think the truth will shame you, but the truth just asks you to see clearly. It asks you to stop performing, to stop pretending you don't know when you do, to stop twisting facts to protect feelings. Your feelings. You've put a lot of energy into maintaining your narrative. You've rehearsed it, shared it, reinforced it. But if it's not true, it will rot. Even if it sounds good, you don't have to tear yourself down, but you do have to take off the mask. The one that says, I did everything right. The one that says, I was always the one who got hurt. The one that says, I didn't know any better. Maybe you didn't, but maybe you did, and you just didn't want to face what knowing would mean. The truth can hurt, but it also heals. Not instantly, not painlessly, but truth is the only ground you can build a real life on. Every time you reject it, you delay the peace you claim to want. You stay trapped in performance. You stay half alive. You stay surrounded by people who only know the version of you that never gets challenged. You say you want the truth, but truth is inconvenient. It rearranges things. It changes relationships. It exposes what's been ignored. It burns through what's fake. You say you want clarity, but do you? Because clarity doesn't flatter, it frees. And freedom always costs comfort, always. You say you want love. You talk about connection, depth, truth. You say you're looking for something real. You want someone who sees you, stays with you, chooses you for who you are. But when you feel unseen, unloved, or alone, you don't reach for love. You reach for attention. You settle. Not because you don't know the difference, but because attention is easier to get. Love takes time. It takes patience. It asks for presence. Attention is fast. You can get it in seconds. A message, a like, a glance, a reaction. It doesn't take effort. It doesn't take trust. It doesn't even take honesty. You can post something, say something, wear something, and someone, somewhere will notice. You don't have to risk anything real. And for a moment, that's enough. But it fades. Attention always fades. That's why you keep chasing it. You get the reply and feel high for a second, then it's gone. So you look for more. You open an app, you check your phone again, you scroll, hoping something pulls you in. You want to be seen, and attention gives you the illusion that you are. But being noticed isn't the same as being known, and being wanted isn't the same as being loved. You say you're waiting for the right person, but in the meantime, you entertain people who don't actually care. You keep conversations alive just to feel like someone's there. You let people into your life who never ask real questions. You flirt because it feels good to be wanted, even if you don't want them back. You say it's harmless, but it's not. Every time you settle for attention, you train yourself to stop asking for more. You say you're strong. You say you don't need anyone. But if that were true, you wouldn't keep checking if they viewed your story. You wouldn't keep texting people who don't follow through. You wouldn't keep accepting crumbs and pretending it's enough. You're not weak, but you're hungry. And when you're hungry, even scraps look like a meal. You don't want a connection based on effort. You want chemistry, intensity, someone who shows up fast and hits all the right notes. But most of the time, that's not love. It's attention. It's the rush of being noticed, of being chosen for a moment. You confuse the spark for substance, and when it fades, you blame them. But the truth is, you knew it wasn't real. You just didn't want to feel alone. Love doesn't always come with fireworks. It doesn't always feel electric. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, slow, and that scares you because you've gotten used to fast. You've gotten used to people showing up with a lot of energy and leaving just as quick. You've built your expectations around attention, not around care, not around truth. You post things you don't mean just to see who responds. You hint at things you won't say directly. You leave the door open for people you know aren't right for you. You keep them around because having someone is better than having no one. You say you're over them, but you still light the match just to see if they'll come closer. You want love, but you make choices that keep it out. Because love requires standards, boundaries, space. Love asks you to say no to what's easy, to what feels good but goes nowhere. Attention never asks that of you. Attention says yes to anything. Love says, I need more. You say you're looking for the one, but you don't protect your time. You give your energy away to anyone who offers a little validation. You act like you're just having fun, but deep down, you feel empty after. You check your phone and hope something fills the gap. It doesn't. You settle for attention because you don't believe love is close. You think it's rare. You think it's delayed. You think it's coming, but not now. So you fill the silence with people who don't matter. You pretend it's fine. You laugh it off. You say it's just how things are now. But that's a story you tell yourself, so you don't have to wait with open hands. Waiting with open hands feels vulnerable. It means not grabbing the first thing that shows up. It means not entertaining every hey. It means believing you deserve more than just being wanted. It means holding out for something you can't control the timing of. You say you know your worth, but your choices don't match your words. You don't protect yourself from people who treat you like an option. You let them back in again and again just to feel something, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because pain feels better than numbness. And sometimes, attention is your way of avoiding the silence. You've learned how to be liked, how to get noticed, how to keep the conversation going. You know how to be wanted, but you don't know how to be loved because you rarely give anyone the chance. You wear the mask. You keep things light. You don't ask for more because more might push them away. And if they leave, you're left with nothing. But love doesn't live where you perform. Love lives where you tell the truth, where you say no to what doesn't feel right, where you walk away even if it means being alone. Love comes when you stop begging to be seen and start showing up as you are, even if no one's watching. You're not too much. You're just giving too much to people who aren't offering anything real. You're not too emotional. You're just emotionally invested in things that aren't built to hold you. You're not unlucky. You're just distracted by noise. Attention is loud. It shouts. It flashes. It shows up fast and fades even faster. Love is quieter. It takes longer. It builds slowly. It doesn't rush to impress. It stays, but you have to make room for it. You have to stop feeding the part of you that only wants to feel wanted. You have to stop settling for sparks when what you want is a fire that doesn't burn out. You say you want love. Prove it. Let go of the empty conversations. Let go of the one who only shows up when it's easy. Let go of the need to be seen and start living like you're already whole. Because the love you're waiting for won't compete with distractions. It waits for your attention, and it needs all of it. You hate being judged. You say it all the time. You want people to accept you, to understand your intentions, to give you space to be yourself. You want them to look past the surface and see the full picture. You want grace. But when you feel insecure, when you're unsure of yourself, when things get heavy, you start judging, not just yourself, others. You judge to cope. It happens quietly, in your head, in small comments, in the way you look at people who make different choices. You think you're just being honest, just making observations. But really, you're managing your discomfort by projecting it onto someone else. You call it noticing patterns or just having standards. But what you're really doing is creating distance. Because judgment makes space between you and the parts of yourself you don't want to face. You judge someone for being too loud, too confident, too dramatic. But deep down, you wish you could speak that freely. You wish you didn't care so much about how you're perceived. You wish you could express yourself without scanning the room. So instead of admitting the longing, you reduce them. You call it annoying. You say they're doing too much. But the truth is, they're doing what you won't allow yourself to do. You judge someone for being too quiet, too soft, too passive. You say they lack drive, that they're wasting their potential. But part of you envies the calm, the stillness, the freedom from performing. They don't chase the same validation you do, and that threatens your story. So you criticize what you don't understand. Not because it's wrong, but because it challenges you. You judge people's relationships, how they act, who they choose. You tell yourself you'd never tolerate that, never do that, never settle for that. But some of your opinions aren't about principle. They're about pain, about what you haven't healed, about the choices you regret but haven't forgiven yourself for. And judging them lets you avoid looking at yourself. You scroll and judge people's lives without realizing it. What they post, how they dress, what they share. You say you're just observing, but you're really filtering your own value through comparison. Judgment helps you feel superior for a second. It gives you a false sense of control. But underneath it, there's fear, there's doubt, there's shame. You judge people who want attention, but you want it too. You just ask for it differently. You package it better. You tell yourself you're above it, but you still check who viewed your story. You still care about how you're seen. You just hide it better. And that difference makes you feel righteous. But it's not righteousness, it's performance. You think judgment protects you. If you can see people's flaws, you won't be caught off guard. If you can stay above them, you won't feel rejected. But judgment isolates. It disconnects. It keeps you from empathy, from presence, from real connection. Because you're not meeting people as they are. You're stacking them against the version of yourself you're trying to defend. You say you don't judge, but look at your reactions. When someone's messy, when someone's different, when someone's wrong. Look at how quickly your mind creates labels. Look at how fast you put people in categories. Look at how often you use other people's flaws to justify your own behavior. You don't do it to hurt them. You do it to avoid discomfort. But it still costs you something. You want to be accepted, but you don't always extend that same acceptance. You say, I'm doing my best, but you don't believe others when they say the same. You want people to assume good intent from you, but you assume the worst from others. That disconnect shows up in how you speak, how you scroll, how you interact, how you walk through the world. You judge people for not being self-aware. But judgment isn't self-awareness. It's distraction. It's deflection. Real awareness looks inward first. It asks, why do I care so much about this? Why does this bother me? What part of me feels threatened? That's the harder path. But you skip that path. You take the shortcut, and the shortcut is judgment. Judgment feels strong, but it's usually fear in disguise. Fear that you're not enough. Fear that you've missed something. Fear that if you stop judging others, you'll have to face your own reflection. So you keep the focus outward. You keep the critique running. It gives you something to hold on to, something to anchor your identity, but it's built on sand. Judgment is addictive. It feeds your ego. It makes you feel right. It makes you feel smart. But it also makes you small. It keeps you from growing. Because when you're busy judging, you're not listening. When you're judging, you're not learning. When you're judging, you're not open to anything new. You're just reinforcing what you already believe, even if what you believe is hurting you. You judge others harshly because you judge yourself the same way, maybe even worse. You project the pressure you carry. You hold everyone to standards that don't even make you happy. You critique what reflects back your insecurities, and the judgment becomes a shield. If you stay on offense, you never have to be vulnerable. You never have to say, that hurt me, or I feel insecure, or I wish I could be like that. But judgment doesn't heal what it hides. It just numbs the feeling for a while. Eventually, it turns inward. You judge others so much that it becomes second nature to judge yourself. Every mistake, every failure, every moment of weakness. You turn the same sharpness inward, and you wonder why peace never stays long. You can't grow and judge at the same time. You can't learn and defend your ego. You can't love and perform superiority. You have to choose. And if you really want peace, if you really want to be understood, you have to stop using judgment as a crutch. You judge to cope, but you don't need to. You're allowed to not know. You're allowed to feel uncomfortable. You're allowed to be wrong. You're allowed to let people live without needing to reduce them first. Judgment keeps you protected, but it also keeps you disconnected from others and from yourself. You say you're open-minded. You think you listen. You think you welcome different ideas. You tell yourself you're willing to grow. But if you look closer, you'll see the pattern. You only listen to what fits. You only welcome what's familiar. You call it open-mindedness, but it's not. It's comfort. You're not open, you're filtered. Your mind is closed to discomfort. You treat discomfort like a threat. You don't call it that, but your actions show it. You change the subject when the topic challenges you. You stop listening when the tone feels sharp. You tune out when someone points at something in you that doesn't line up. You defend fast. You justify before you reflect. You tell yourself they're wrong or biased or extreme. And maybe sometimes they are, but that's not why you pulled away. You pulled away because it made you uncomfortable. You don't want to hear things that question your version of truth. You want to feel correct. You want to feel safe in your worldview. You've built an identity around your opinions, and now you protect them like territory. You confuse that with clarity. But it's not clarity. It's fear dressed up like certainty. You follow people who sound like you. You read things that reinforce your beliefs. You share posts that echo your feelings. And when someone brings a different view, you don't engage. You retreat. Or you argue. Not to understand, but to win. You don't ask questions. You assume. You interpret. You twist the meaning to fit your frame. You're not learning. You're protecting the walls you built. You say things like, I respect other opinions, but you don't. You respect quiet ones, polite ones, ones that don't press on anything important. But when someone challenges your view directly, when someone says you might be wrong or unaware or privileged or limited, you stop hearing them. You label them. Too negative, too harsh, too sensitive, too much. You reduce their point so you don't have to wrestle with it. You treat discomfort like damage, like something's wrong if it makes you tense. But discomfort is how growth happens. It's how you stretch. It's how you notice what's stuck. You say you want to grow, but real growth starts when something doesn't sit right. When you don't get to feel good while learning. When you don't get to nod along. When the truth goes against what you hoped was true. Being open-minded doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It means sitting with something that makes you flinch. It means holding a view you don't agree with long enough to understand it. Not so you can accept it, but so you can learn where it comes from. So you can see the people behind the words. You think you know yourself, but your beliefs were built on repetition, not reflection. You learned what to think long before you knew how to question it. You inherited some of your values. You absorbed them. You were shaped by the rooms you sat in, by the people you wanted to be like, by the pain you avoided. Now those values feel like who you are, but they're not fixed, and if you don't test them, they're not yours. They're just what you've kept close. You say you're open to feedback, but when someone gives it, you shrink or argue. You get quiet, then defensive. You think they don't get it. You think they're being harsh. You protect your ego like it's the most fragile part of you. And maybe it is, but ego isn't the same as identity. It's the armor. And growth never happens behind armor. You avoid certain topics, you avoid certain people, you avoid spaces where your views won't be the dominant ones. You say it's about energy, you say it's about peace, but sometimes it's about not wanting to feel exposed, not wanting to be the one who's uninformed, not wanting to be humbled. You want to be understood, but you don't want to understand people who see things differently. You want respect, but only give it when the person sounds like you. You want truth, but only when it doesn't confront your story. You don't need to believe everything. But if you never let yourself feel challenged, you'll never find out what's underneath your certainty. You'll never grow into someone bigger than your current framework. You'll just keep circling the same ideas, polishing them, defending them, calling it wisdom. Real wisdom listens. Real wisdom admits when it was wrong. Real wisdom learns without needing to be right. Real wisdom doesn't panic when it feels something shift. If you're only open to what doesn't challenge you, you're not open. You're comfortable. And comfort doesn't build character. It just keeps you where you are. Ask yourself what ideas make you tense, what opinions you roll your eyes at before they even finish speaking, what people you've written off, what voices you've muted, not because they're wrong, but because they make you feel something you don't want to feel. That feeling, that discomfort, is the start of something. If you sit with it long enough, it'll show you what's ready to change. Not what to believe, but what to explore. You say you want to evolve, then evolve. Not by force, not by guilt, but by listening. Not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. Let the hard ideas in, let the contradictions in, let the mirror in, because the mind that's open only when it feels good isn't open. It's closed in a cage called comfort, and you built it. You seek meaning. You want your life to matter, to be purposeful, to feel aligned. You search for it in your goals, your relationships, your work, your routines. You look for meaning in the things you do, in the things you say, in the places you go. But when the noise quiets down, when the distractions fade, when there's nothing left but silence, You pull away. You avoid it. You think silence is empty, but it's not. Silence is where the meaning lives, and you keep running from it. You fill your time with sound, with activity, with movement. You're busy because busy feels productive. Busy feels like progress. But busy is often just noise. You distract yourself with tasks that don't matter. You turn on the TV, you scroll, you talk when you don't need to. You do anything to avoid being still, because stillness forces you to look inward. And looking inward means facing what you've been running from. You say you're too busy to meditate, too busy to sit still, too busy to reflect. But what you really mean is that you're afraid of what you might find in that silence. You're afraid that if you stop, you'll have to confront the parts of you that don't feel settled. You'll have to face the questions that make you uncomfortable. The parts of yourself that you've buried under layers of noise and activity. You tell yourself that you'll reflect later when you have time. But the truth is, you don't make time for silence because you fear what it might reveal. You say you want clarity, but clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from being still. It comes from the moments when you're quiet enough to hear your own thoughts, to listen to your own feelings, to understand what's been missing. But you don't want that kind of clarity. You want the kind of clarity that's loud, the kind that's clear without effort, the kind that gives you answers without making you pause and think. But the truth is, the answers you seek won't come until you make room for them. And that room is found in silence. You tell yourself you'll find meaning in your work, in your relationships, in your activities. You think that meaning is something you can chase, something you can earn through accomplishment. But meaning isn't something you do. It's something you discover. And you won't find it by running. You find it by stopping, by letting everything fall away, by sitting with yourself long enough to hear what you've been avoiding. When was the last time you were completely alone with your thoughts, without any distractions? When was the last time you allowed yourself to just sit, breathe, and reflect? If you're like most people, it's been a while. You've learned to fill every moment with something, because silence feels like emptiness. But silence isn't emptiness. It's space. And in that space, meaning grows. You might feel like silence is a void, something to be feared or avoided. But what if that silence is where you find the truth? What if that stillness is where you meet the version of yourself you've been ignoring? What if the answers you're looking for have been buried in the quiet, waiting for you to listen? You're afraid of silence because it forces you to face yourself. You can't hide in the noise anymore. You can't drown out the uncomfortable thoughts. You can't escape the parts of you that need attention. Silence brings up all the things you've been avoiding. The doubts, the fears, the regrets, the questions, the parts of your life that don't fit neatly into your story. But silence isn't an enemy, it's a tool. It's the space where growth happens. It's where you get to hear your true voice, not the one shaped by other people's opinions or expectations. It's where you hear your own needs, your own desires, your own truth. And when you stop running from it, you start to find the answers you've been looking for all along. You say you're searching for meaning, but you avoid the silence that holds it. You fill your days with noise, with busyness, with distraction, because it's easier to stay occupied than it is to face the questions that silence asks. You're afraid of what you'll discover if you stop. You're afraid that silence will show you that you're not where you want to be, or that you're not doing what you truly care about. But silence doesn't judge, it doesn't condemn, it just reveals. It shows you what's there, whether you're ready for it or not. You can't move forward without first understanding where you are. And the only way to truly understand where you are is to sit with yourself, to be present with what's inside. That means making space for silence, not running from it. That means giving yourself permission to stop, to breathe, to reflect, and to listen. You might resist the silence at first. You might feel uncomfortable. You might feel like there's something wrong with you for needing a break from the noise. But the truth is, you need it. You need the stillness to recharge. You need the quiet to reconnect with what truly matters. You need the silence to hear your heart, your soul, your intuition, because without it, you'll keep chasing things that won't fill the emptiness. You want meaning. You want purpose. You want a life that feels aligned, but you won't find it in the noise. You won't find it in the rush. You won't find it in doing more. You'll find it in the silence, in the moments when everything stops and all that's left is you, your thoughts, and the space to just be. That's where the meaning lives. That's where your truth is. But you have to be willing to sit with it. You have to be willing to embrace the silence long enough to hear it. You say you want purpose. You want to feel like your life means something. You want to know that your efforts are moving you in the right direction. You want to make an impact. You want to build something that lasts. You want to look back and feel proud. But you want that purpose without the pain. You want the rewards without the work. You want the destination without the journey. You see other people who seem to have found their purpose. You look at them and think, I could do that. I could be that. You imagine how fulfilling it would be to wake up every day and do something that truly matters. But then the idea of what that actually takes, the sacrifices, the discipline, the consistency, starts to feel too much. And that's where you stop. You want purpose, but you avoid the discomfort it demands. You think that if it were really meant for you, it would feel easier. You wait for the right time, the right mood, the right opportunity. You tell yourself you'll get serious about it tomorrow, next week, next year. But the truth is, the right time never comes. Because discipline isn't about waiting. It's about choosing when it's hard. It's about doing what matters even when you don't feel like it. You say you're not ready, that you need more information or more experience, but the reality is you'll never feel fully ready. You'll always be one step behind in your mind, one reason away from starting. You convince yourself that the pain of the process isn't worth the outcome. You think you can get to purpose without feeling the struggle, without putting in the effort that demands sacrifice. But purpose requires discipline, and discipline hurts. You want to feel fulfilled, but you don't want to give up your comfort. You don't want to wake up early. You don't want to spend hours in study, practice, or hard work. You don't want to say no to distractions, to temptations, to the easy choices. You want purpose, but you want it without giving up what's easy. You want to stay in the same routines, keep the same habits, avoid the discomfort that comes with growth. You tell yourself that the things you're doing now will lead to purpose someday. You think that if you just keep going along, eventually it'll all come together. But that's not how it works. You have to choose purpose now, every day, in the small things, in the moments where you'd rather check out, where you'd rather take the shortcut, where you'd rather stay comfortable. You don't build purpose in the easy moments. You build it when it's hard. You want meaning, but you resist the hard work it takes to find it. You say that you'll pursue it once things settle, once you have more free time, once you're in a better place mentally or financially. But those reasons are just excuses. You'll never have enough time. You'll never be in the perfect place to start. If you're waiting for conditions to be perfect, you'll wait forever. Discipline means working with what you have, in the place you're at, even if it's not ideal. You're afraid of failure, and you use that fear to hold yourself back. You say, what if I try and fail? What you don't realize is that you're already failing by not trying at all. You can't get to purpose without risking failure. You can't find out what you're capable of without pushing yourself through challenges. Failure is part of the process. It's not the end. It's the lesson. You want to have a significant impact, but you don't want to put in the time to develop the skills needed to make that impact. You see the end result, but you're not willing to put in the thousands of hours of work, the years of mistakes, the moments of doubt, and the discipline required to get there. You want to skip the grind and jump straight to the reward, but the reward isn't meaningful if it's handed to you. The journey is what makes it worth it. The discipline is what makes the purpose real. You tell yourself that you'll do it later, that you just need a break, that you deserve some time off. But the reality is that those moments of rest aren't building anything. They're not leading you closer to your goals. They're just delaying the work that will actually get you there. You can't take a break from what matters. You can't put off the things that are important and expect them to magically happen. You can't wait until you feel like it, because you won't always feel like it. You look at others and see their success, and part of you believes that they have something you don't. You think they have some secret, some easier way, some privilege you haven't been given. But they've put in the work. They've made the sacrifices. They've chosen discomfort over convenience time and time again. They've built their purpose with discipline, and they've kept going even when it was hard. You could do that too. You just have to stop waiting for it to feel good and start doing it, even when it doesn't. You think the pain of discipline will be too much, that it will take too much of you, but the truth is, you're already paying the price for not committing. The pain of discipline may hurt, but it's nothing compared to the regret you'll feel if you keep avoiding it. The discomfort of growth will pass, but the emptiness of avoiding it will stay. You're afraid of discipline because it forces you to face what you could be. It forces you to let go of old habits and old excuses. It asks you to admit that you've been holding back. And that's the hardest part, admitting that you're the one who's been in your own way. But once you face that, once you decide to commit to the work, you'll start to see the growth. You'll start to find the purpose you've been chasing. You want purpose, but you avoid the discipline it requires. You think you can get it without paying the price, without doing the work, without facing the struggle. But the reality is, purpose isn't a gift. It's earned. It's built in the small moments, in the days when you want to quit but choose to keep going anyway. It's forged in the discomfort, in the hours when you would rather be doing anything else. If you want purpose, you have to stop avoiding the pain and start embracing the discipline. You say you're afraid of failure. You say you worry about what will happen if things don't work out. But deep down, that's not really the fear. The truth is, you're afraid of who you'd become without your excuses. You're afraid of facing the reality that you've been hiding behind them. You're afraid of what would happen if you had to take full responsibility for your actions, your choices, your life. You've built your life around reasons why you can't do things. Why you haven't started that project. Why you haven't taken the leap. Why you haven't put in the effort. You've told yourself it's not the right time. You've said you're not ready. You've convinced yourself that your circumstances are holding you back. And those excuses have kept you comfortable. They've given you something to hide behind. Because as long as you have a reason, you don't have to admit that you haven't tried. But if you let go of those excuses, then what's left? If you stop blaming time, money, your job, your past, other people, what's left to hold on to? What happens when the only thing standing between you and your goals is your own fear of doing the work? What happens when you have no one to blame but yourself? That's what you're really afraid of. You're not afraid of failing. You're afraid of having no excuses. You're afraid of realizing that the reason you're not where you want to be is because you haven't shown up fully. You're afraid of the truth, that you've been hiding behind your own story. You want things to change, but you don't want to change the way you live. You want results, but you want them without sacrifice. You want success, but you don't want to feel the discomfort of hard work, the effort, or the vulnerability that comes with taking full responsibility for your life. So you keep your excuses close. You keep telling yourself that things will get better when circumstances change, but they won't, not unless you change. You're comfortable in your excuses. They protect you from the fear of doing what needs to be done. They give you something to hold on to when things get tough, but they also keep you stuck. Every time you let an excuse control your actions, you reinforce the idea that you can't. Every time you choose a reason over action, you reinforce the belief that you're not capable. You're afraid of what you'll have to face without those excuses. Because when you remove them, you see the truth. You see that you've been hiding from what you really want. You see how much time you've spent avoiding the discomfort of change. You see how often you've let yourself off the hook, how many times you've given yourself a pass for not showing up. And when you see all of that, you realize that it's not the world holding you back, it's you. The truth is, you can't keep running from the work. You can't keep pretending that it's external factors stopping you from moving forward. There will always be a reason why now isn't the right time. There will always be a setback, a challenge, a distraction. If you keep waiting for perfect conditions, you'll never start. The perfect time doesn't exist. The The perfect circumstances don't exist. You only get one moment, right now, and it's time to stop making excuses for why you're not doing the work that matters. You tell yourself that you'll start when things settle down, when you have more time, when you're less tired, when you feel more inspired. But all of those are just excuses. The truth is, it's never going to feel easy. It's never going to feel like the right time. There will always be obstacles, but those obstacles are part of the process. They are the work. And the sooner you stop hiding behind excuses, the sooner you can start doing what needs to be done. You're afraid of losing the comfort of your excuses because they allow you to stay safe. They protect you from failure, from disappointment, from putting yourself out there and risking rejection. But they also protect you from growth. They protect you from learning the skills you need to succeed. They protect you from building the resilience you need to keep going. Without them, you'd have to face the truth that your success is on you. And that's a hard truth to accept. The fear of failure is just a mask. The real fear is the discomfort of accountability. The real fear is facing the fact that you haven't done everything you can to reach your goals. You haven't pushed yourself to your limits. You haven't taken the necessary steps. You've been hiding in the shadows of your own excuses, telling yourself you're not ready, you're not capable, you're not enough. But deep down, you know that's not true. You want things to change, but you're afraid of what that means for you. You're afraid of the effort. You're afraid of the vulnerability. You're afraid of admitting that you're the one holding yourself back. But once you realize that the only thing standing between you and your goals is your willingness to take responsibility for your own actions, you will see that the excuses are just a barrier you've created to avoid the real work. You're not afraid of failing. You're afraid of losing the comfort of not trying. You're afraid of facing the truth that you've been wasting time, that you've been holding back, that you've been letting yourself off the hook. You're afraid of confronting the person you could have been if you'd stopped making excuses. You're afraid of the person you'd become once you stop hiding behind the reasons you've been using to avoid growth. But the real work, the work that brings real change, comes when you stop blaming circumstances, other people, or yourself for where you are. It comes when you accept that the only thing standing between you and what you want is the action you're refusing to take. The excuses may have kept you safe, but they have also kept you small. And until you let them go, you'll never know what you're truly capable of. You'll forget most of this tomorrow. You'll read it now, maybe feel something for a moment. You'll nod along, think it's true, maybe even feel a little uncomfortable. But by tomorrow, it'll be a distant thought. The words will fade, the feeling will pass, and you'll pretend you never saw it. You'll move on to the next thing, the next distraction, the next task that pulls you away. This moment will slip into the background, like all the others that came before it. You've been through this cycle before. You've had moments of clarity, moments of insight, moments where you thought, this time, things will change. You've heard the words that struck you deep, the truths that challenged you, and yet every time, you've let them slip away. Every time, you've let the discomfort of change fade into the comfort of routine. It's easier to forget than to act. It's easier to leave things as they are than to face the work of change. You'll forget this, not because you don't care, but because it's easier to ignore what's uncomfortable. It's easier to go back to the way things were, to the habits that don't require effort, to the excuses that make sense. You'll dismiss what you read here as something that doesn't apply to you. Or maybe you'll convince yourself that you'll get to it later, when you have more time, when things calm down, when you feel more ready. But the truth is, you'll keep putting it off. You'll let the idea of change sit on the shelf while you continue to live the way you always have. You say you want to improve. You say you want to live a life that feels meaningful. You say you want to do better. But the gap between what you want and what you do is the space where your excuses live. It's the space where your fear of discomfort thrives. You'll read this, and for a moment, you'll believe it. But then the routine will call you back. The distractions will pull you in, and you'll forget that you ever had a moment of clarity. You'll forget the part of you that wanted to make a change, the part that felt a little spark of possibility. And that's what happens when you refuse to face the work of change. You let it slip through your fingers. You'll say to yourself, I'll remember this tomorrow. I'll remember how I felt. But you won't. You'll go back to your day. You'll fall back into your old ways. You'll forget the feeling of discomfort that pushed you to rethink things. You'll bury it under the next task, the next meeting, the next thing that demands your attention. The ideas that challenge you will fade into the background, replaced by the noise of life. And that's how you keep yourself stuck. You've done it before, haven't you? You've heard something that made you think, I need to change. And for a moment, you felt the weight of it. But then you got busy. The feeling passed. You moved on. The change didn't happen. And tomorrow, you'll be right back where you started. Reading another post, hearing another message, feeling the same brief spark of motivation before it fades again. You're good at convincing yourself that tomorrow will be the day. Tomorrow, you'll take action. Tomorrow, you'll follow through. But tomorrow never comes, and the cycle continues. You forget the things that pushed you, you forget the discomfort, you forget the need to change, because it's easier to forget than to take the hard steps required to make a shift. The truth is, you don't want to change. Not really. Not yet. Not enough to do something uncomfortable. Not enough to risk failing, to risk disappointment, to risk facing the truth about what you've been avoiding. You're comfortable with the way things are, even if they aren't exactly where you want them to be. You tell yourself it's too hard, it's too much, it's not the right time. You tell yourself you'll get to it later, and you'll forget again. It's easier to stay the same, to stay in the familiar, to keep the same excuses. It's easier to stay in the cycle. You'll forget because change requires effort. It requires discomfort. It requires breaking habits that have become so ingrained that you don't even realize you're stuck in them. Change requires you to face the part of yourself that you don't want to see. It requires you to admit that you're not where you want to be and that you've been the one standing in your own way. You'll forget because facing that truth feels too much. It feels easier to pretend you're fine, to pretend you'll get to it eventually, to forget what's uncomfortable. And yet, the discomfort is where the growth is. It's in those moments when you stop and question why you do what you do. It's in those moments when you choose something different, something harder. That's where the change begins. But you have to remember it long enough to take action. And that's what you won't do. Not today, not tomorrow. You'll put it off again like you always do. And eventually, the moment will fade into the background and you'll forget. You'll forget because the pain of staying the same is easier to ignore than the pain of changing. You won't act because it's easier to stay comfortable, even if that comfort is empty. Even if you know deep down that you're capable of more, that you want more. You'll forget, and that's how you stay stuck. You'll keep pretending that one day, when the time is right, you'll change. But the truth is, the time will never be perfect. And by the time you realize that, you'll have forgotten why it mattered in the first place. You'll forget, but the work will still be there, waiting, and you'll be right back here, hoping that something else will push you to take action. But nothing will change until you do. Until you stop pretending you'll get to it later. Stop waiting for the right moment, and stop forgetting the things that challenge you. The real question is, how long will you keep forgetting?